Well, a very good afternoon. This is Talk. I'm Peter Cardwell. Lots to discuss between now and 7 o'clock, including that migration deal, which seems to be falling apart at the seams. There are so many different criticisms coming in. Human rights grounds, the EU may criticise it, may not even get through there. Lots of ways in which, we talked about this yesterday, but 1 in 17 people are the only maximum that's actually going to get through. Keir Starmer says 1 in 50 people, or 50 people a week, I should say, will be going to France as a result of the scheme. What do you think? Also, Reform supporters, a poll says, would back Labour if Keir Starmer could put an end to the small boats crisis. If you're a Reform UK supporter and you would be persuaded by Keir Starmer if he could solve small boats, I'd love to hear from you. Similarly, if you think that's a load of rubbish, I'd love to hear from you too. 0344 499 1000. Stop giving millions of people sick notes, GPs have been told. Send them to the gym, send them to a work coach. What do you think of that? Also, Angela Rayner has been suspended from a very important union, Unite, over the bin strike chaos with the group set to review ties with the Labour Party. Could they be in for a financial shock as a result of all of that? We'll also talk about the fact that the man who had his Rolex stolen in London, still no arrests in that. We'll talk about Bob Villan as well. Pascal Robinson Foster, who is the person who shouted death to the IDF, has told the supporters, maybe don't say that, maybe don't incite violence, maybe don't incite murder against people who are members of a foreign military. He hasn't been arrested yet, he should be, but we'll see what happens there. Richard Tice as well, the deputy leader of Reform UK, he's criticised the King. We'll talk about the groups across the UK who want to define the ban on Palestine action. They say we're all Palestine action now. Spoiler alert, we absolutely are not. We'll talk about the heat, we'll talk about the sun in both senses. One in the sense that it's very warm, and also what's in the paper tomorrow. We'll find out from John Lucas a bit later on. The UK's F-35 fighter jets have been grounded because there aren't any spares or engineers. What on earth is going on? Aren't we spending so much money on the military? Why can't we keep these in action? Lots to discuss between now and 7. Give me your thoughts. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text me 87222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV. Follow me at Peter Cardwell. Remember, the main number does 3 things. You can send me a voice note, less than a minute please. You can send me a WhatsApp text message, or give me a ring. 0344 499 1000. Loads to discuss. Stay with us here on Talk. Well, let's get straight into the politics. Ryan Saby is with me. He's the Deputy Political Editor of The Sun. Ryan, it's good to have you with us this afternoon. Lots happening in Westminster. Just before we chat to you, let's just remind ourselves of the migrant deal Keir Starmer set out yesterday.
So I'm pleased to announce our agreement today on a groundbreaking returns pilot. For the very first time, migrants arriving via small boat will be detained and returned to France in short order. In exchange for every return, a different individual will be allowed to come here via a safe route, controlled and legal, subject to strict security checks, and only open to those who have not tried to enter the UK illegally.
Well, that was Keir Starmer there. Later on, he refused to give details on who will actually be sent back.
It will be operationalised in coming weeks, so that is a good thing. It is, of course, a pilot. It is there to prove the concept that if you come over by small boats, then you will be returned to France. Of course, being a pilot, it is very important that it works, and we need to make sure that it does work. And if it works, what it does is break the model, and that's the only way in the end to stop this vile trade. And so that's why this is a real breakthrough moment today. As I say, many governments have tried to get this far and have failed to do so. In terms of those that will be returned, I'm not going to go into the details of that because that has the potential to undermine how this will operate.
It has the potential to undermine how this will operate if he gives further details of how it will operate. Ryan, what did you make of that answer? Because I found that very curious, and 24 hours on, I think we're in a position where we are actually looking for quite a number of answers here, but we're not getting them.
Yeah, I think the problem with what Keir Starmer said, and that's why this moment has come under a lot of scrutiny, is because it seems at the moment during this pilot scheme there'll only be around 50 or so that go back every week. So how do you actually select them? Is it the first 50 that come over? Is it the last 50 that come over in one particular week? Are you looking at their family circumstances? Do you get to know what their family circumstances are? Do they have any identification on them? How will these people actually be selected? And I think that's one of the big problems. And the trouble is, this is meant to be a deterrent. Now, I think it might work as a deterrent in the round when you add lots of things in, and if it ramps up, and we're at early stages. But it's one of many things that the government are trying. But can it really be a deterrent when the odds are, if we look at the numbers coming in, for every 17 people who come here at the moment during this pilot scheme, only one person will go back. So how much of a deterrent can it actually be? It's the criteria we really know how to, what we need to get to the bottom of to actually see whether this scheme will be a success. But the trouble is, the numbers are so high at the moment, it's very difficult to see who they're going to be sending back and what criteria that person will be under.
Yeah, and it's interesting, with 573 migrants arriving across the Channel yesterday, it would take nearly 12 weeks to get rid of all of them, even if all of them were part of this scheme. There are just a lot of questions unanswered. Macron as well blaming Brexit, saying the British people had been sold a lie, and he attacked the vote, agreeing in principle to return Channel migrants to France, likely, of course, to face legal challenges. Tell us a little bit about how the reaction has been from various people talking about whether this will get through the EU, whether this will get through human rights lawyers, the courts. Tell us what's been happening today and what people have been saying about this, Ryan.
Yeah, one of the key things that Yvette Cooper said this morning, actually, she talked about the legal verification that will need to be signed off by the European Union. Brussels will need to get involved. However, she did say that Brussels, Great Britain and France have been pretty much in lockstep every single step of the way. So she seems to think that there will be no hurdle to getting this deal off the ground. I don't think she seems to think there won't be a big battle with Brussels. But what do other states in Europe seem to think about that? I haven't heard too much about that at the moment. Now, Downing Street seem to say that the legal hurdles and the system is robust. They're not expecting any massive problems when it comes to the legalities of this, mainly because, unlike Rwanda, France is seen as a safe country. There can be no dispute over that. But what happens when one of the individuals may claim that they've got a family in this country and they've got a right to actually remain here? Do they go through the asylum process? Are they detained and then sent straight back? So I think there's a lot up for debate there when it comes to the legal actions. I think it seems like it, on balance, will probably get through the EU, but there could be a lot of soundings from other EU countries when it comes to the actual individuals and the legal challenges and the legal fraternity, that when they get their hands on this, that could be a different matter altogether.
Well, it's interesting that there are a number of people unhappy about this. One of them is Nigel Farage, the leader of Reform UK. We'll talk about his deputy in a second, but Nigel Farage was actually out on the Channel yesterday. He recorded this video of the crisis.
It's the usual drill. A dinghy has left the French beaches, been escorted over by the French Navy, and if we turn around we can see the Border Force vessel, and he's now waiting on the 12-mile line for the handover. Bear in mind, we've given the French 800 million quid since 2014, and still their Navy hands over migrant boats. Looks to be about 70 people in the boat. It's lying very low in the water. We've looked through the binoculars. The French Navy have now stopped, and this boat is right on the edge of French and British waters, and Border Force are waiting just behind me. It's interesting. We're literally watching one government politely handing over to another government. 78 people on that rib, one woman, 3 kids, and 74 young adult males whose identity we do not know. If this is not a national security emergency, I don't know what is.
Nigel Farage there on a video posted online yesterday about this crisis. It's hard to disagree with many of his points there, and the farce that we have Border Force waiting there to pick up the migrants on the 12-mile line. They're not even coming across the entire Channel, and Nigel Farage pointing out what would actually change as a result of this. Keir Starmer, of course, wants it to be some form of deterrent, Ryan, but it doesn't seem that that will happen.
No, it's going to be difficult. I think just one thing taken in isolation, that's just not going to be the case. I think it will just add to the mix. I think you have to tie the deal that Sakir and Emmanuel Macron signed yesterday into the new maritime tactics that are going to be deployed or they are starting to be deployed. You may have seen those videos of those dinghies being punctured in recent weeks. That has to be working alongside trying to crack down on the illegal economy and the black market the black economy in this country, cutting down on people working in delivery companies and just sort of being flooded into economies, hair salons, car washes. I know that have been the focus of attention in recent months and years. But also, if there's another deterrent, we talk about the offshoring centres, whether Sakir talks to Albania, North Macedonia, the Balkans, all those countries may have to play a part in trying to set up some kind of offshoring centre. There is just not one silver bullet in this, and I think that the government do appreciate that. It's all got to work together, but it's gonna be very, very difficult. And I think in the short term, if you're only going to have 50 a week, does it really act as a deterrent? And Sakir had better hope that it ramps up pretty quickly.
Interesting thoughts from Tom in Cheltenham. He says, basic maths here, but if it's 1 in 17 people returned to France and Starmer is delighting in it being 50 people a week, that means he's admitting he's comfortable with almost 3,500 people each month, 850 a week, coming here and staying even with this scheme in place. There are lots of people getting in touch. We'll come to more of those messages in just a second. Just want to rattle through a couple more political stories with you, Ryan, while I have you here. One of which is about Richard Tice, who is the Deputy Leader of Reform UK, of course. He's criticised the King. Tell us about this.
Yeah, Richard Tice wasn't particularly happy with the way that the King got involved at the state banquet and actually sort of moving into politics. You'd have remembered just earlier in the week at that state banquet, everyone in their complete refinery. It looked absolutely spectacular at Windsor Castle, but the actual words coming from the King, where he talks about irregular migration, should he be actually talking about that? So I thought that was a particularly interesting note. But the King, formerly obviously Prince Charles, the Prince of Wales, always liked to somehow weed himself into political debate. Some would say he actually framed it when it comes to the environment.
Yeah, and architecture as well. He said at the state banquet at Windsor Castle, these challenges know no borders. No fortress can protect us against them this time. Instead, the answer lies in partnership, and we, France and Britain, must help to lead the way. Our two nations share not only values, but also the tireless determination to act in them in the world. And Richard Tice has questioned whether the King got the balance right. He says it is unwise for the King to use any of that language about the boats. Ryan, what do you make of that?
Yeah, my understanding is that the King wasn't referring to the boats in that circumstance. He was talking about other issues such as climate change. But I think when you actually read those words, we're talking about no borders, and it kind of conjures up the imagery of talking about illegal migration. I think you have to contrast this with the Queen. But the Queen has stood at a state banquet and actually said these words. I don't know, but I highly doubt it. Yeah. So it is interesting to see this creep of what King Charles is willing to get involved in, and sort of willing. And you just wonder whether it was to actually sort of send a message to Emmanuel Macron, if there was that deal to be done, just to get that over the line, and how the King was actually deployed to actually achieve that.
Tad has been in touch from Cambridge and says, echoes those sentiments. Afternoon, Peter. The late lamented Queen Elizabeth II always managed to stay out of politics, especially contentious issues that are highly dubious. His Majesty the King would be well advised to follow that precept. It's far less fraught that way, says Tad. Totally agree with you, Tad. The King, the Queen, whoever the monarch is, should be above politics. Just two more stories I want to take your temperature on, Ryan. One is about the millions of sick notes that have been given out, and we should stop those apparently and send patients to the gym, GPs have been told. Tell us about this.
Yeah, no, I think there's a strong argument, and the Health Secretary Wes Streeting has kind of sort of grabbed this issue, because there are 2.8 million people, the best part of 3 million people, who are off on long-term sick, and it's all about trying to get them into work. So I think his argument is, look, if you carry on as the way we've been going in recent years, they can just be signed off. Will they ever go back to work? Who knows? They could just remain on that sick note sort of basis. I think the thing is you have to try and catch them early. So in that first few months, you get them back into work somehow. So by actually sending in work coaches, sending them people into the gym, they can get fit. I think it's just one of those approaches where, again, you've got to try and get everything comes together at the same time, just to actually try and get people back into the workplace, because the longer you leave it, the harder it gets, and the bills just get higher and higher for the government. It's taxpayers who are paying that money, and it's the economy that is affected, and our productivity, which is a massive issue.
Yeah. And just finally, Angela Rayner suspended from Unite over the bin strike chaos. The bins have led to her being dumped, or at least suspended.
Yeah, Unite Union not happy at all with Angela Rayner. I think it looked that they weren't particularly happy with the bin situation, perhaps also the welfare votes and winter fuel coming into that as well in recent months. And it was Unite, of course, who gave Angela Rayner, I think, the best part of £10,000 at the last election. They've certainly given her quite a lot of money over the years. And I think perhaps, although we've got this Angela Rayner story on one level, on another level, they actually voted at their conference to actually sort of re-examine their relationship with Labour, which is actually staggering. If you look at the amount of money that Labour Unite have given Labour over the years, between 2010 and 2020, Unite gave them £42 million, and they continue to give money to. At the last election, it was certainly Labour candidates. So could all that be thrown into jeopardy by Angela Rayner and how she has enraged them over the bin situation? So I think this is one to watch, but the Unite the Union have certainly put down a marker today.
Ryan, thank you. That's Ryan Saby there, who is Deputy Political Editor of The Sun. He's also Economics Editor of The Title. Thank you for that. Lots of people getting in touch on all these issues. Leslie says Reform voters will in no way vote Labour. It's not just migrants, it's the WFA welfare. What does WFA stand for? Sorry, I don't know. The farmers, veterans, Winter Fuel Allowance, of course. Winter Fuel Allowance. It's the Winter Fuel Allowance, the farmers, veterans, the tax issues, the Islamophobia issue, etc., says Leslie. Gary says, what on earth, Peter? How could anyone support U-turn Starlin? As a Reform supporter, I cannot support a socialist. Nothing Labour has implemented has worked or been implemented fully. Labour is a joke. Jane says, the Prime Minister says, if it works, starting in weeks, EU sign it off. It is a pilot. He doesn't care about stopping the boat because he doesn't want to. And Clive in North Norfolk says, why is it that we can make checks on migrants in France but not in the UK? And Becky says, just a quick thought, I thought smash the gangs was the only way to stop this illegal migration. So I said, so I take it that two-chair Keir is now admitting smash the gangs won't work and the only way forward is to break the model. I suspect he now has a new worthless soundbite we're going to hear every third word, says Becky. Lots more to discuss, lots of calls coming in as well. We'll get to those very, very soon indeed as well. I want to talk to Peter Blexley next about London's dangerous streetwear. There are so many people in London and right around the country as well who are feeling fearful about having anything that is of any value, even an old phone like this one. It's a very old iPhone. I don't bring that out if I'm walking in the street. And the manhunt for the killer continues after a Rolex-wearing father who was just 26 years old killed outside a five-star hotel. We'll also talk about the groups in the UK defying the Palestine action ban. We're all Palestine action now, except we're not. Stay with us here on Talk.
Keir Starmer is living in some kind of parallel universe.
Yeah.
He and Rachel Reeves have put through the biggest tax rises in a generation that took effect in April. And we've now seen, with this morning's figures, the economy actually shrinking. That's now the second month in a row that the economy is shrinking as a consequence of the increased taxes this Labour government has put through. Unemployment has gone up in every single month of this Labour government. Unemployment is now 12% higher than it was a year ago.
Penny in Essex has been in touch and says, listening to Starmer really believing all the lies coming out of his mouth made me reach for the sick bucket, and with that bargain basement Macron looking very pleased with himself too. Absolutely sickening. Rachel says, good afternoon, Peter. Just got to say, Nigel Farage looks in every way like a Prime Minister in waiting. I wish the general election would come sooner. And Doc in South Wales says, regarding the new illegal immigrants deal, if the EU doesn't appear to have an issue with the deal, you can bet your bottom dollar that's a terrible deal for us. They will know the details, but us plebs aren't allowed to, so two-tier will be able to claim a success. We'll still end up with more illegal migrants, and it will cost us more and more money, all part of their plan. Goodness me, God help us, says Doc in South Wales. And Dave says, if the King involves himself in politics, he can't expect not to be criticised. Not everyone will agree with his beliefs, but perhaps he can help with the irregular problem and accommodate the migrants in the empty rooms of his many diversified properties, says Dave. Don't think that's going to happen anytime soon. And Leslie said, I loved our late Queen, but sadly, thanks to Charles, I am no longer a monarchist, says Leslie. Well, let's talk to the king of crime analysis. That is Peter Blexley, former Metropolitan Police detective, about so many worrying stories. Peter, especially about London's dangerous streets, a particularly disturbing story about a man stabbed for wearing a Rolex. Tell us about this.
Yes, Mr. Blue Stevens, a man much loved by his family, lives in Yateley in Surrey, travels to London on Thursday night to go out for what I would probably call a posh dinner with his much-loved life partner, the mother of his children. And as they leave a restaurant, they are attacked, apparently, by a masked man who may have been on an e-scooter or an electric bike. We're not entirely sure yet. A scuffle ensues. We believe that this person, the robber, may have been trying to steal Mr. Stevens' watch. A knife is produced, and Mr. Stevens, tragically, is fatally stabbed. He's stabbed. He slumps to the ground, and the ambulance are called. People in the meantime, including his partner, try to save his life. The ambulance arrives a mere 4 minutes afterwards. They did all they could, but tragically, Mr. Stevens died. The Metropolitan Police have launched a murder inquiry, of course, and as we speak, no arrests have been made. Welcome once again to lawless Britain and Wild West London.
I mean, that is an absolutely horrendous story. There are so many people in London and right around the country as well who are worried about having any form of valuables on show, any sort of watch, or it doesn't have to be a Rolex, any sort of watch or jewellery or even talking on a phone that can be snatched. I mean, you won't necessarily be stabbed, of course, but there's something like 1 in 3 people in London have had their phone stolen at one stage, and it's not just about the phone, it's about what you can access within it as well. There's a real danger here, and there are crime gangs and individuals who know they can basically get away with it, Peter.
Well, with regards to watches, I was out with some friends the other night in Soho, one of whom is a watch trader. And guess what? He wasn't wearing a watch.
Yeah.
He would not wear one of his many watches to the West End on an evening out. And if a watch trader...
Fascinating, Peter. Fascinating.
Yeah, and that's a watch trader, a friend of mine.
Yeah.
Absolutely astonishing. People that work so hard to earned and paid for things that they love, treasured possessions like watches or an expensive handbag, perhaps, if you're a lady fortunate enough to own one. Don't bring them into London, because I'm afraid there is a shockingly high chance that you will be robbed of it. And with regards to phones, just a couple of weeks ago, I was speaking to a man who had his phone robbed from him in central London. Not only did the robbers steal the phone, they had his access to his bank details, they emptied his bank account, they took his Nectar loyalty points, supermarket loyalty points, they stole those, and he had a cup of coffee in credit on a coffee shop app. And they went in and had that cup of coffee. These thieves have no scruples. Their criminality knows no bounds. And it breaks my heart to say the streets have been surrendered by the police to the criminals.
And Jane says Mayor Sadiq Khan has ruined London. He should resign and hand back his knighthood. And Cliff in Berkshire says, if I were to drive a carload of guys to the local bank for them to rob the place, I would be rightly convicted of aiding and abetting theft. Surely, therefore, if skippers pick up migrants mid-channel and facilitate illegal entry to the UK for those migrants, could we not bring private prosecutions against the facilitators? One other story I want to talk to you about before you go, Peter, is these groups across the UK setting to defy the Palestine action ban. We know of a number of different groupings across the United Kingdom, in London and Manchester, in Wales and in Londonderry as well, in the northwest of Northern Ireland. They're going to hold signs saying, I oppose genocide, I support Palestine action. That, of course, is a crime.
Yes, as of midnight on Monday night, Palestine Action became a proscribed organisation. It is therefore illegal to be a member, to partake in their activities, or to otherwise show support for this group. They are now in the same equivalent kind of lawlessness as Hamas, as Hezbollah, for example. So if you go onto the streets of the UK, anywhere, and express support for them, then I sincerely hope you will be arrested by the police, wherever you may do that, and however you might express your support.
We're just looking at footage now from the 5th of July, a little bit earlier this month, of the police attempting to take these signs off, arresting these people. And I just wonder, in regard to this, first of all, I fully support the police in their action. I think Palestine Action were absolutely right to be prescribed. If you're holding a sign supporting someone, and you're perhaps wearing a T-shirt supporting someone, supporting a prescribed organisation, that's enough, isn't it, to get you arrested? What would you receive? Would you receive a caution? Would it go to court? What would generally happen with that, Peter?
I would utter the words, you're nicked or you're arrested, get in the back of the van, mind your head, and be carted off to a police station or a charging centre. That's what should happen. As for how the police will dispose of these cases, it will be very interesting to see how many people express their support. How many will the police be able to arrest? Our prisons are full. The criminal justice system is unfortunately grinding to a halt in many regards. So will they issue them with cautions, or will they charge them? These are decisions really for the police in conjunction with the CPS to make. So it will be very interesting to see what the establishment, what the state, what their view is towards this.
Peter, thank you for your thoughts today. That's Peter Blexley, former Metropolitan Police detective. Lots to discuss there. What do you think should happen to people holding those signs who are supporting Palestine Action? Let me know your thoughts. 0344 499 1000. Another texter says, of course the unions are annoyed with Rayner. She hasn't repaid them for the politically motivated strikes while the Tories were in office. And Kelvin in Macclesfield says, good afternoon, Peter. How ironic that United have dumped Angela Rayner. Funny that the bin men do what they do best, dump the rubbish, says Kelvin in Macclesfield. Strong opinions on Angela Rayner. We'll take some more of your texts and calls and voice notes and all the rest of it in just a second here on Talk. We'll also speak a little bit later on about that specifically with a former spokesman for the Labour Party. Stay with us. Let's speak to Caroline in London, who's given me a ring on 0344 499 1000. Caroline, what do you think of the migration plans the government have? Thanks for your call, by the way.
Hi, Peter. Okay, I'm going to be very calm. I'll try my best. I can't even call him a prime minister. As far as I'm concerned, he is a traitor, literally a traitor. He doesn't even know what the word deal means. It's not even a joke. I don't even know the word. This is beyond a joke. The whole world is watching. It is, I thought today of what happened in World War II, what our soldiers did to stop the Nazis coming over our channel. As far as I'm concerned, we are at war, one with our government and our civil service, the people of Britain, and we are at war with illegal immigrants coming from all over the world. I wouldn't be surprised if they're given a cup of tea when they land. It is just shocking.
I mean, it's more than a cup of tea. They're put up in hotels. They're put up in hotels that many people can't afford to go to or stay in themselves.
Yeah, before they even get there, probably when they come off the boat, they hand them a cup. I mean, it is, this is now beyond serious. Our country is being taken away from us on a level never seen in history. The Queen would never, she'd be turning in her grave. Charles is also a traitor. I'm sorry, I don't care. I'm done.
That's a big thing. It's a big thing, Caroline, to call both the Prime Minister of this country and the King traitors.
Well, that's how I feel.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Don't apologise.
One thing I cannot think of. One thing that Starmer's done for the British people since he entered.
Well, it's really interesting you mentioned this, Caroline, because when he talks about positive things, he talks about investment in breakfast clubs. He talks about investment in this, that, and the other. It's all spending. It's all things you throw money at. It's not things you've solved problems about, and he will say this is a solution. I wonder seriously how many migrants are honestly going to be sent back to France as a result of this scheme.
Can I just say this, Peter? Not only did he not answer the question, if the Home Office, who are in complete disarray, don't know how many illegal people are here from visas, what chance has this got to work?
Yeah.
It's got as much chance as a pig with white wings flying in the sky now, and we all know it. My issue is, what are we going to do as a country? I saw a video the other day where Germany are putting illegal immigrants across part of the border in Poland, and 400 or 500 Polish every day go to the border. They are not allowing them in. They're standing there with their Polish flags, singing their Polish, whatever the name is, the anthem.
The national anthem, okay.
We can't even do that here because we've got the police against us, because the police are ruled by Sadiq Khan and God knows who else. So we haven't got anyone as British citizens on our side in this country, apart from they want to take every penny. They're going to start charging us for us going to the toilet soon. They're spending money, obscene money, where we're going to get our gas from Brazil when we're sitting on our own gas in this country.
Yeah.
It is, and we've got to start saying no. And I love talkTV. I just love it. But sometimes I think, I don't even want to turn it on today. What else is going to happen today?
Yeah.
How, not just one thing, 500 things.
Well, there's so many different things that are challenging us, and I think there is a real risk of people being pushed over the edge, especially with the hot weather. I know can get into, can affect people psychologically. I think there's a lot, actually, I mean, I don't want there to be. I'm not saying there should be. I'm not encouraging anybody to do this. I would never do that. But there's such a level of frustration that I wouldn't be surprised if there are riots again this summer, Caroline.
But I don't want that, because I think that's what they want. That is not the way to go. The only way we can do something, and it's not going to happen. The Brits, either the Brits are not aware of what's going on because they want to push it under the carpet, or whatever. The other worry I have is I listened to an incredible interview for an hour and 15 minutes yesterday, Ben Habib being interviewed, and he talked from the minute he got into reform, the whole story. Everyone's thinking Farage is our hero. Farage is, in some ways, as bad as Starmer and the Tories.
Well, we're actually going to hear more from Ben in just a few minutes' time, Caroline, so no doubt you'll be interested to hear that, so stay tuned for Ben Habib. He's coming up in just a few minutes' time. Caroline, thanks for that. Lots more to discuss with you, I'm sure, on another occasion, but we'll just have to leave it there for the meantime, because I want to get in Herbie in Harrow and Mark in Lincolnshire before we go to a break. Herbie, your thoughts on all of this, please?
Oh, Peter, what a week for news this week's been. Unbelievable. You couldn't make most of the stories up even if you tried. I mean, to say, can you trust a man on anything? No, you can't. And as for him pandering to the half-bite-sized Frenchman, it's disgusting. He wants to get back into the EU, into Europe, and there's no...
You think that's what this is all about?
Oh, something like that, Peter. It's got to be. I mean, to say, the man is destroying the country. He's lying to the people. He's doing things that he wants to do. He's a globalist. He's not a prime minister. He's not a man for the country. He's a globalist. You know.
You don't think he cares about Britain?
No, not at all. If he did, he wouldn't be doing what he's doing. He's destroying the nation. He's destroying the people. You know, we're no longer got an identity, Peter. We've lost it. It's gone.
Harvey, thanks for your thoughts. Mark's in Lincolnshire. Mark, what would you like to say about the migration deal?
Hi there, Peter.
Hiya.
Hiya. Yeah, my take on all this is, you know, the one in, one out thing. I mean, what he's essentially doing is he's confirming that, yeah, we are going to replace you because we're going to keep them coming, but, you know, they won't be illegal. Which, by the way, I actually, you know, I hate to be the I told you so guy, but I did mention this before the election last year, that when Starmer gets in, he will legalise illegal migration. That's essentially what he's doing.
Keeps talking about them being irregular migrants rather than illegal migrants.
I don't give a stuff what he wants me to call them.
No, I'm just saying that he's calling them that, and I find that change in language fascinating.
This is the left-wing communist ideology, isn't it? This is how they view these things. You know, as your previous callers have said, you know, it's very much a globalist thing. It's actually quite a weird mix, I find, anyway, that you have this globalism, but you also have these elements of communism, you know, washed into it all as well, you know, with all the authoritarianism.
Maybe it's just a sign of someone who doesn't believe very much.
He probably doesn't believe in that much. I think he believes in, you know, the law is the law, you know, that precedent of, you know, that's the top of everything.
Yeah, the rule of law, which is sometimes not a bad thing.
Yeah, it's sometimes not a bad thing, but at the same time, he can't get it through his head that, you know, as government, especially with the majority he's got, he can essentially make the laws. I mean, he certainly will anyway. He will make the laws, but there'll be laws to punish the people of this country. You know, whether that's Islamophobia, whether it's, you know, to do with migration, whatever it's to do with, you can guarantee it'll be there to punish us. It won't be to punish anybody else. Because every single deal he makes, every single move he makes, it seems to be against the British people. And I'm rapidly coming to the conclusion, Peter, that I just genuinely, I can't see that we can vote our way out of this anymore, Peter. I think that, you know, Farage...
Even a vote for Reform UK?
No, he's not offering enough. He's not going to do what needs to be done. You know, yeah, he talks about deportation. I mean, his last interview, which was with Nick Ferrari on LBC, Peter, he's now saying he aspires to deport people, to deport the illegals. Aspires? I mean, for goodness sakes, you know, this is a guy that's built that party's reputation and voter base. Based completely.
Is Farage perhaps getting a reality check of how difficult it actually is legally to do what he wants to do?
Yeah, but this is the point, Peter, isn't it? Because, as I'm saying, you know, he's not going to do what he would have to do in order to deport the illegals. Because in order to deport them, you have to essentially dismantle the entire system. Because our entire establishment, you know, everything that runs this country, from the universities to the Home Office to the civil service entirely, it's all far left run. That's what's running through it. That's the same ideology that Starmer has runs through everything within our country. And the only way, if you're any kind of a right-wing party, whether you're, you know, more centrist like the Tories or Reform, or whether you're more like the party I'm with, obviously UKIP, you know, you have to have a plan in order to dismantle that. Because unless you're going to do that, essentially, when you go into government, you have to be prepared to essentially...
Do you think Starmer had any plan? Do you think he had any idea what he wanted to do?
Yeah, punish the British people. I think he hates us for voting Brexit just as much as Macron hates us for voting Brexit. I think they're cut from the same cloth, the pair of them, and they're both a couple of snakes. You know, he's just... I mean, you saw the recent thing, didn't you, yesterday, which is, I believe it's been burnt now, hasn't it? The effigy in Northern Ireland.
The The boat itself, I thought it was in really poor taste.
It is poor taste, but this is how deep it's running within the people, Peter.
Okay.
You know, they keep going on and on and on and on like this. What do they think is going to end up happening, Peter?
Yeah,
I mean, I watched a video yesterday, which was in, I believe it was Norfolk. And where it is, there's about 12 local guys playing football. And out of nowhere, a 14-year-old girl comes running up to them crying because there's about half a dozen migrants from the hotel just outside the park that are basically harassing them, making sexual innuendos, trying to touch them and all this kind of stuff. And this group of lads that are playing football essentially just chase them out of the park all the way back to the hotel.
Yeah, I've seen...
This is going to... This stuff is going to keep happening.
Yeah.
It's only going to escalate, Peter.
Yeah, I've seen quite a few videos like that. People send me things like that all the time. There are a lot of people very, very worried about safety, particularly of young women and girls as well. It's a big issue that continues. Mark, thanks for your call. That's Mark in Lincolnshire there. And thanks to Alison, who says Starmer actually did call them illegal migrants yesterday. No doubt he'll issue a grovelling apology for that at some point. We're going to talk about Angela Rayner in a second, being kicked out of Unite. We'll talk more about migration as well. And Ben Habib's coming up very soon as well. 0344 499 1000 to get your point across too. Stay with us here on Talk.
The problem is these refreshes, all you do is you store up problems on the back benches, because you sack somebody, they go on the back bench and get people around them who are unhappy, and they become a focal point for dissent. So he'll be trying to avoid that. But there are all these different factions. You've got Wes Streeting, who sees himself as a sort of Blairite, and then you've got the left, who are all behind Angela Rayner. So you've got these different factions. He's got to try and he's got to tiptoe through this very carefully.
Thank you to everybody who's been in touch, including Margaret in Birmingham, who says, I agree with Richard Tice. That speech had Starmer's fingerprints all over it. Written by the government, yes, but surely the King would have read every word first. Our late Queen would have not agreed to that political speech, says Margaret in Birmingham. Margaret, you're right, and I think that what would often happen, certainly, is that there was a sort of protective ring around Queen Elizabeth II. First of all, she wouldn't get involved in politics. We knew her views on the Union, unsurprisingly. It was her kingdom, and she wanted Scotland to remain part of the United Kingdom, as I do. But nonetheless, that almost got out sort of by accident, essentially. She didn't advertise her views in the way that Charles clearly is doing. I agree with you entirely, Margaret, and I think it's a dangerous precedent, because when you have a monarch who's supposed to be apolitical and is supposed to be able to deal with any government of any stripe, I mean, were Charles the monarch when, for example, Nigel Farage hypothetically becomes Prime Minister in a few years' time? Will he be able to shield his displeasure from that, for example? Well, the Queen would have got on with it. The Queen would have done exactly what she did for many, many years with many, over a dozen prime ministers, and just dealt with whoever it was in front of her at the time, because she believed the will of the people. So it's a really, really good point, Margaret, and I do think it is a worrying development. Ian in Essex says, great show, but it's an awful situation in this country. It's like living two lives. I can wear my nice watch and use my phone in my local area, and walking the dog when I go into London or in my local town, it's no watch. Don't get my phone out, use AirPods, watch where you sit in a train, watch over your shoulder if I'm carrying a laptop into London. More money on police, please, not on migrants, says Ian in Essex. I think, Ian, you will echo the thoughts of many people. I want to talk now about Angela Rayner, the Deputy Prime Minister. She's been suspended from a union, from Unite, I think it is the biggest union in the country, over the bin strike chaos. The group is set to review ties with the Labour Party. They, of course, give an awful lot of money to the Labour Party, and this comes after the bin strike in Birmingham. It's been going on for 6 months. Rubbish is still piled high in the city's streets. But there are many people, including the Unite General Secretary Sharon Graham, who have accused the Deputy Prime Minister of failing to act and smearing the workers. Sharon Graham said Unite is crystal clear. It will call out bad employers regardless of the colour of the rosette. Angela Rayner has had every opportunity to intervene and resolve this dispute, but has instead backed a rogue council that has peddled lies and smeared its workers, fighting huge pay cuts. I'm sure Birmingham Council would deny that. Let's get some analysis from James Mathewson. He is a former Labour spokesman. Are you surprised at this development, James?
Hi, Peter. It's not a huge development or a huge shock in the trade union world, to be honest. It's kind of been coming down the pipe for a while. Angela Rayner has tried to walk this tightrope, right? Being in a Labour government, being in a UK government, which is always going to have to do things that the trade unions are going to disagree with, the kind of, the people who the trade unions negotiate with, but also being the trade unionist at the cabinet table, right? She is the face of the trade union movement in this government, and of course Labour is the trade union movement. It's meant to be representative of that movement. So she's walked this very difficult tightrope, and I think it was only really a matter of time before she fell off it.
It's a very good point that it is a tightrope, and to govern is to choose. And the thing is that unions are usually oppositional forces to governments. Now we've got the fact that they're opposing this government and the council in Birmingham as well. How much of a political risk do you think this is, not just for Angela Rayner, but for the Labour Party more generally? Because if they're reviewing ties, well, that actually means potentially an awful lot of money not going to the Labour Party.
Yeah, I mean, it's not the first time it's happened with Unite. Unite have pulled money before. They are an affiliate still, so for your viewers that don't know, the Labour Party has several or many trade unions that are affiliated officially to the Labour Party, and they get a certain amount of delegates to send to the Labour Party conference, and they get a certain amount of seats on the NEC, which is the kind of governing body of the Labour Party.
Doesn't that stand for National Executive Committee, isn't that right?
It certainly does, but God, look at you, Peter, you're practically a socialist knowing that, but you've got that.
We'll keep the red flag flying high, James. I think the likelihood of me joining Unite is low.
Is low, I think so, yeah. Similar for me. Look, I left Unite because I wasn't happy with their leadership under Sharon Graham, who was the current Secretary General. And she, the thing is with Unite, it's always been a very political union. So the other big one, the other big beast in the trade union world with Labour is Unison. And they've always been kind of in competition. And even when Labour Party seats, and this is where the big thing will be, get contested in selection, they get to put forward their people, people who've served a certain amount of time in the union, people who've held positions of branch officers, they get to be Labour MPs. That's how it's always worked. Unite, of course, pulling their affiliation from the Labour Party will mean that they do not get their trade unionists into Parliament. And Angela Rayner herself got a seat because of Unison. So it will be very interesting to see. I don't see the likes of Unison and GMB pulling their support. Unite are the most left-wing of those unions, but it'll be interesting to see where this goes for the others.
Is this just about the bin strike, or is it about the direction of the Labour government more generally, do you think?
Yeah, you've hit the nail on the head. Unfortunately, it's about Keir Starmer. It's about Rachel Reeves. It's about the economic vision of this government, or lack thereof, really. They're not pleasing anyone, are they? They're not pleasing their base in the trade union movement or on the left, and they're not pleasing anybody else, it seems, either. So, you know, you've got to ask yourself at some point, if the trade unions are pulling away from you, but you're still hemorrhaging votes on the kind of right of the British political axis, then what are you doing, and what are you doing it for?
And what do you think? Do you think Rayner is just being used as a proxy here? I just wonder as well about the migration plan, whether that is actually going to help the unions, whether the left is going to be pleased with it in any way, or will they actually just feel, like many on the right do, that it's not going to work?
Yeah, the unions have a really difficult relationship with the whole migration and immigration situation, and that's because of obviously Labour and because of, you know, low-cost foreign labour undercutting British labour and a lot of their members. So they're often quite quiet on it, so you won't hear a lot from them. Unite have been quite outspoken about it. Other unions like the CWU have, because they're kind of more political entities, but the likes of Unison are quite cautious about that. But I do think we will see this be very difficult for Angela Rayner. And also, look, she is, in my opinion, she is somebody who can really bring the movement, the Labour movement and the Labour Party together and hold it together. Starmer's relied on her in a similar way to what Blair did with John Prescott, you know, to be that kind of conduit, if you like, between
she herself called herself John Prescott in a skirt. Those are Angela Rayner's words.
She did, yeah. She did. And yeah, I mean, you know, it's quite complimentary in the Labour Party to call yourself John Prescott.
Not necessarily to John Prescott, but I mean, it brings quite an arresting mental image, or perhaps a mental image for which she should be arrested. James, thank you very much. That's James Mathewson, their former Labour spokesman. Speaking of the left wing, Mike has been in touch and says, please can I ask a favour? When people say all the civil service are left wing, please can you correct them? It is not all. I am a civil servant and equally, if not more, frustrated than everyone else in the country, and so are most of my colleagues. The left element of the civil service are those at the higher echelons, the SCS, Senior Civil Service, the Directors General and the Permanent Secretaries. Add a left-wing minister to that mix and the whole direction of that department shift to the left, but don't umbrella us all as lefties. It's not correct and it's unfair. Thank you, says Mike. Mike, I'm very, very happy to do that, although you've committed a horrible civil service crime in using the word umbrella as a verb there, which it is not. But nonetheless, Mike, I worked with a load of civil servants, 3.5 years as a special advisor, as many people will know. There were some, certainly, who were on the left, no doubt about that. There were some who didn't like Brexit, but there were an awful lot who were actually very, very good at their jobs, and I hadn't a clue what their political opinions were, or I knew what their political opinions were, but they didn't interfere with their work, which I looked at very, very closely. And actually one civil servant, quite senior civil servant, who I used to work with, then went on to become a Conservative special advisor. His name is James Nation, and he is actually going to be on the debate desk tomorrow in this studio I'm on between 10 and 1, and James Nation is going to join us then. So, Mike, you will hear from a former civil servant who's definitely on the right. He actually went on to run the policy unit for Rishi Sunak in Number 10, so a very high-powered person. He got an OBE for it. Terry in Slough says, I don't know what makes this Labour government so stupid, but it really works, says Terry. And Dennis in Manchester says, good afternoon, Peter. I've said it before, and I'll say it again. My two biggest fears about the election in 2029 are there'll be nothing left of this country by then, and also that the split vote on the right will allow Labour back in possibly, heaven forbid, in coalition with the Liberal Democrats. What do you think? Great show, says Dennis. Dennis, I'm going to annoy you, probably, and I'm going to agree with you by saying that I think the most likely scenario after the next election is a Liberal Democrat coalition, or some sort of agreement, confidence of supply or something like that. I'm not sure Reform UK can actually get a majority government. Even if they got a minority government, that might not be, or enough for a minority, that might not be enough if Labour and the Liberal Democrats can join together. I think a lot of people would be very, very worried about that and believe things would be worse in this country. We're going to talk to Ben Habib, who would be no fan of that. He'll be with us in just a second after the news, so stay with us. Very good evening. This is Talk Drive. I'm Peter Cardwell with you until 7. Loads to discuss, including is the migrant deal that Keir Starmer gave us yesterday falling apart at the seams? I think it probably is, actually. There's hundreds of grinning dingy migrants arriving in the UK, 573 of them in the last 24 hours. Loads to discuss on all of that. Is that deal going to work? That one in, one out deal? Have we been sold a pop? And if the EU doesn't actually object to it and make a huge fuss, does that mean that there's not much of a pep in it? Is there not much, does the deal have any actual teeth? Loads of people getting in touch. We're going to talk to Ben Habib about it in a second. Also, Angela Rayner suspended from a Labour union. We should stop giving millions of sick notes and send patients to the gym. GPs have been told. Groups across the UK are to defy the ban on Palestine action. We'll also talk to Nicole Lambert about that, and the fact that there are one of the singers from Bob Vylan, the Glastonbury act, Pascal Robinson Foster. He hates people knowing his name, so definitely don't tell anybody his name is Pascal Robinson Foster. We wouldn't want people knowing the name Pascal Robinson Foster, so please don't repeat Pascal Robinson Foster. He has told his supporters that actually saying death to the IDF isn't a good thing. It's also a bit warm. We'll talk about that as well. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text me at 722 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV, follow me at Peter Cardwell. You can send me a voice note, you can send me a WhatsApp text message, or give me a ring on 0344 499 1000. Loads to discuss between now and Kevin O'Sullivan at 7 o'clock. Stay with us here on Talk. Thank you to Red Feathers on Twitter, who says the Starmer-Macron deal seems impenetrable. We know the French police can act when cameras are rolling, so what's to stop them doing so for a few months to prove Starmer and his best chum have been amazingly successful when numbers fall? Cynical, perhaps. Well, listen, as I often say, just because you're cynical doesn't necessarily mean you're wrong. Justin says, I think Keir Starmer is doing a great job stopping people coming to the UK. It's all about getting rid of the attraction to the UK, and his policies ruining our economy, increasing crime in the streets, increasing unemployment, making the country less attractive, proven by our own people leaving. He needs to go further, faster and harder, and once those in the boats are treated as badly as the UK citizens, the boats will be leaving the UK and going to France. I'm saving for one myself. Last one to leave. Please turn the lights off. Les talking about the crime story as well. Big crime story about the young man who was wearing a Rolex and was stabbed for it. All London postcodes will now prefix with GP, Gangster's Paradise, the Johannesburg of the UK. And another person says, what's the bet that two-tier Keir will do another U-turn over his migrant deal with France? He's done so many U-turns, I'm surprised that when he leaves number 10 he doesn't turn round and go back in. And on the King as well, lots of people getting in touch about the King and what he has said. Angela says, I too am happy to criticise the King for being political, woke and unhelpful. Words matter. Well, what do you think? Let us know your thoughts. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. I want to remind yourselves now about the migrant deal the Prime Minister set out yesterday.
So I'm pleased to announce our agreement today on a groundbreaking returns pilot. For the very first time, migrants arriving via small boat will be detained and returned to France in short order. In exchange for every return, a different individual will be allowed to come here via a safe route, controlled and legal, subject to strict security checks, and only open to those who have not tried to enter the UK illegally.
But the Prime Minister refused to say what migrants will actually be sent back.
It will be operationalised in coming weeks, so that is a good thing. It is, of course, a pilot. It is there to prove the concept that if you come over by small boats, then you will be returned to France. Of course, being a pilot, it is very important that it works, and we need to make sure that it does work. And if it works, what it does is break the model, and that's the only way in the end to stop this vile trade. And so that's why this is a real breakthrough moment today. As I say, many governments have tried to get this far and have failed to do so. In terms of those that will be returned, I'm not going to go into the details of that because that has the potential to undermine how this will operate.
How would it undermine how the scheme will operate if you give us the details of what will happen? Would that mean people would avoid certain things? Would they? I just feel there's so much more detail of this scheme. What about the family links? Are those family links going to be people who are here? Are they people who are legitimately here? Were they asylum seekers previously? Did they come across in small boats? Are they employed? Do we give them benefits? You know, there's an awful lot, I think, that just hasn't been worked out in all of this. I want to talk to Ben Habib now. He is the leader of Advance UK. Ben, what do you make of this scheme? Good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon. Well, it's like shuffling pieces, the shuffling deck chairs on a sinking Titanic. It makes no difference, as in the Prime Minister's own words. For everyone that they send back to France, one will be sent from France to us, and that gives Macron a greater incentive, not that he needed one, to send lots of illegal migrants across the Channel, because even if we send them back, he'll be able to get rid of more French migrants that he's got in his own country. And then that's before we even begin to consider the impact of the European Convention of Human Rights and the legal actions that no doubt be filed by those migrants that we seek to send back to France. And just by some miracle, I don't see much benefit, by the way, in sending migrants back to France if we're going to get one from France. But by some miracle, if we do send a migrant back to France, they'll be back on a dinghy the next day, coming back to the UK, and they'll play the system again. It's just a joke.
If you had a 6% chance, if you're going to spend £3,000 to come across, or whatever it is, to come across on a small boat, and they said there's a 6% chance you could get sent back to France, but you can come again if you want to, you'd take that chance, wouldn't you, Ben?
Of course, it's a 94% chance of succeeding.
Yeah.
And 94%, is a very, very high percentage. And you've already taken huge risks to come from Libya or wherever it is where, the origin of your journey across the Mediterranean into Europe, across Europe. This is a gauntlet that they would gladly run. And worst case scenario, they're in France. That's the worst. It's just a ridiculous scheme. And people might remember the Dublin arrangement, accord, agreement, whatever they called it, under which over the 5-year period for which we were a member of it, roughly, I think the net number of illegal migrants that went back to France was 17. People keep saying this is down to Brexit. We lost the Dublin arrangement. Well, the Dublin arrangement never worked. Yeah. It's just, again, moving pieces around a board. It's not actually deporting people. And I come back to it, and you and I have spoken about this many, many times, Peter. Border enforcement has got to require enforcing our borders. It's a physical thing. To hell with Macron, to hell with what the French think, to hell with trying to get the French to police our borders, get a dedicated force with suitable training and suitable equipment to intercept the dinghies, stop them as they seek to enter our territorial waters, and send them back to France. And before anyone says, oh, that can't work, they'll all drown, it's nonsense. The Belgians do it. The Belgians have a dedicated force. They've reduced. They intercept these dinghies in their waters, they send them back to their beaches, and they've reduced the number of launches from Belgian beaches by 92%, almost wiped it out. If there's a desire to stop people crossing the Channel, it is the easiest thing to be done. There's no political will.
Ben, one of your former political colleagues, now political rival, Nigel Farage, was actually out looking at some of this yesterday. He was on a boat, on a vessel yesterday. He made a little video about it. We're just going to show it now and then get your reaction to it. This is what Nigel Farage said yesterday.
And it's the usual drill. A dinghy has left the French beaches, been escorted over by the French Navy, and if we turn around we can see the border force vessel, and he's now waiting on the 12-mile line for the handover. Bear in mind, we've given the French 800 million quid since 2014, and still their Navy hands over migrant boats. Looks to be about 70 people in the boat. It's lying very low in the water. We've looked through the binoculars. The French Navy have now stopped, and this boat is right on the edge of French and British waters, and border force are waiting just behind me. It's interesting. We're literally watching one government politely handing over to another government. 78 people on that rib, one woman, 3 kids, and 74 young adult males whose identity we do not know. If this is not a national security emergency, I don't know what is.
Ben, surely you would agree with Nigel Farage and a lot of what he is saying there.
I agree 100% with everything he said there. This is two national governments conspiring to undermine their national borders. It's an absolute dereliction of duty by the French and by the British, particularly by the British, because it's into our territorial waters that these people are coming. And the border force, instead of acting as a taxi service, should be intercepting these dinghies and sending them back. And the boat that was sent out by border force is quite evidently not one capable of acting as a deterrent. It looks like a taxi. It doesn't even look like it's meant to be any form of Coast Guard trying to protect British waters. Absolutely wrong approach. We have to enforce our borders. What is national security about if it isn't about enforcing your borders? Why is it that we've forgotten that? Why do we talk about the threat that Russia poses, that Iran poses, other military, hostile military regimes pose to the United Kingdom, if we don't recognize the threat of people coming across our borders without being checked? They're exactly the same thing. And before people say, well, these people aren't armed, it doesn't matter whether they're armed or not. They could easily become armed once they're in the United Kingdom. Borders exist for the security of the country, and they're required to be imposed forcefully. And we've got to create a border force that will actually use force to impose our borders. It's simple. The Polish do it. Every other sensible nation in the country does it. In the world does it. Sorry, forgive me. In the world does it. Why have we forgotten what it means to impose borders? But perhaps it comes. Yeah, sorry. Go on.
I just want to ask you about the polling that we've looked at today in regard to Reform supporters would back Labour, would actually move from parties like yours and like Reform UK, saying they would move to Labour if Keir Starmer would end the small boats crisis. From what you're saying, Ben, it doesn't seem to me that you think there's any possibility of Starmer ending the small boats crisis in any way anyway.
None. No chance of him stopping the small boat crisis. First, he set up Border Security Command. He was going to smash the gangs. Then they were going to, they commissioned a whole lot of drones. That came to nothing. They were then going to intercept the dinghy flows. That came to nothing. Now they're talking about this 1 in, 1 out, which is actually 2 in, 1 out. It ends up with 1 in, whichever way, 2 in, 1 out. Exactly, that's what it is. And no, they've got no desire to do it. There's no will to do it. And the other point I was going to make is that, it's easy to wave away what the King said, that, we don't want borders between our countries. But it was an inappropriate comment to come from the King, particularly at a time when there seemingly are no borders between France and the United Kingdom. We want a border.
It's interesting you mentioned that, Ben, because Jane has been in touch on text and says, unfortunately for the King, he has lost a lot of support this week, many who were loyal to the monarchy. And Angela's been in touch as well. He says that you, Ben, are part of the problem. You've split the right along with UKIP and this other party, Advance UK, which has just been dreamt up. Maybe they're in collusion with the left to deliberately sabotage Reform UK. I'm not accusing you of that, Ben. I don't think that's true.
Sure.
But I mean, Angela's gone far enough to call you traitorous in that regard, in that you're not part of the Reform project anymore. What would you say to Angela?
What I would say to Angela is listen to what Farage says. He says he is not in favour of deporting all illegal migrants. He's on the record repeatedly saying that that's an impossible task to which he will not turn his mind. Therefore, people who've entered this country illegally will be allowed to stay here under a Reform government. There can be no greater encouragement for people to enter the United Kingdom than to know that even a Reform government wouldn't deport them. It's principally for that kind of comment and the complete wishy-washy nature of policies that have emanated from Reform, holding no political philosophy, not delivering for the nation state our freedom of speech, democracy and equality under the law. Reform is all over the place. In the pursuit of power, Farage is actually prostituting any form of political philosophy that you might expect Reform to have. And that is why Advance UK exists. It's got nothing to do with... There's no right wing, by the way. People keep talking about splitting the right wing vote. Who's on the right wing? Do you think the Conservative Party is on the right wing? Absolutely not. Is Farage on the right wing? Absolutely not.
You don't think Farage is right wing at all?
No, I don't think Farage is right wing. I don't know how you define right wing. First of all, I think the schism in politics is between those who believe in the supranational order, governance through, the European Union, WHO, UN, etc., and those of us who believe in a nation-state, democracy, borders, etc. Okay. And Farage, you think Farage sits in our camp, but he doesn't. Listen to what he says. He says he's not worried about the rate of demographic change in the country. He's not in favour of mass deportation of illegal migrants. He recruits Liberal Democrats to stand for reform. He's recruited...
What about Sir Jake Berry, who has moved over to the Conservatives? What do you make of that move? And the fact that there are soundings being taken of many other former Conservative MPs, people like Jonathan Gullis, for example, who sits in this chair, rumoured to be being tapped up to join Reform UK.
Well, Jonathan Gullis may be a better recruit, but Jake Berry voted Remain. He was pro-lockdown. He's pro-net zero. He's pro all the things that Reform stands against. It absolutely boggles the mind why Farage is taking him on.
Ben, thank you very much indeed for your thoughts there. That was Ben Abate there, the leader of Advance UK. A couple of voice notes now. Let's hear from Andrew on the next election.
I don't agree with you entirely about Labour and Lib Dem coalition, because I think a lot of eyes on America at the moment, and if Trump turns around America and at the end of his 4 years he does a good job, we want a bit of that. And I can see Nigel Farage, who's the closest thing we've got to Trump, being elected. Whether he'll get a majority, who knows?
Andrew, I mean, really interesting thoughts there, and thank you for them. The thing I suppose I would say, I don't think you're necessarily wrong at all, but the thing that hasn't really been talked about a huge amount is the fact that there's about a third of people who like Farage and think he's a good guy and think he'd be a decent Prime Minister and think he's a good politician. But there's about 2/3 of people, maybe not as many as that, but certainly a substantial minority of people in this country who really, really hate Farage and really don't like him, and there will be a very anti-Farage vote. I think in the next election, look, we're 4 years away from that. A lot can change in that time, and Andrew, I don't want a Labour-Lib Dem coalition. In fact, that's kind of my worst nightmare of how a country should be run. It's really, really bad. Well, my worst nightmare, I suppose, is Jeremy Corbyn as Prime Minister, but the idea of, you know, Starmer and Davey running this country is not something I would relish at all. I think there is a chance that Nigel Farage becomes Prime Minister. I just think when it comes to the crunch, there'll be such an anti-reform and an anti-Farage vote from so many people in this country. Not people who watch and listen to this station, I'm not saying that for a second. What I'm saying is there are a lot of people out there who vote Labour, who vote Lib Dem, although, you know, times are changing, things are moving a lot, Andrew. So really interesting points. As I said, I don't necessarily disagree with you, but I think there are other factors in all of this as well. Let's hear from Pete, who's been in touch on crime in London.
Just on the watch thefts and handbag thefts in London, Pete, why don't the police go undercover and flash a fancy watch, you know, and obviously have backup and that? And then obviously, like, I know you're putting the policeman or police lady at risk, but, you know, they need to be doing a bit more, mate, don't they? Because, like, I'm a northerner, mate, and I've only ever been to my capital city once. I certainly wouldn't want to be taking my grandkids down there at the minute, mate, to see all our famous historical statues and that. Pete, I mean, that makes an awful lot of sense, and I think there will be people who'll be fearful. I would say, you know, to people that London is a wonderful place. There's loads of great history. The Tower, I'm looking across the river right now at the Tower of London, for example. It's an amazing place. You know, Parliament, I love going around there. I love showing people around, helping people get, you know, tours and things like that. I'd love London to be a much safer city than it is, but I can totally understand why people feel fearful in the capital city. I feel fearful in parts of the capital city. I'm always watching what I'm wearing and where I'm holding my wallet and all that kind of stuff. So Pete, I totally understand where you're coming from there. Thanks for your message. Margaret's been in touch and says Ben needs to stop pulling Nigel to bits. Chris says, does Keir's plan include returning the sausages? Who could forget? Brad in Chiswick says, in West London, says, if Charles declares there are no borders, does that make him king of the world? And Nadine says, Cardi P, how many times have our utterly pathetic and inadequate Prime Minister said the words, this is a breakthrough moment, laughable, we're a laughing stock. Nadine, you're absolutely right. He kept saying groundbreaking. He said they were groundbreaking, I think, 3 times yesterday. I don't think it's groundbreaking at all. Leslie says, James Mathewson admits Labour have to please the unions. Why should any government be beholden to the unions, says Leslie. Dorothy Dorothy in East Kilbride says, I would like to congratulate you for the most non-argumentative interview with James Mathewson. Certainly Peter Barnes, who is going to be on my show tomorrow, actually, between 10 and 1, had quite the argument with James Mathewson last week. But thank you to Dorothy. There's room for heat and light, I feel. Richard in Leeds says, how does the government know if they have relatives in this country, if they throw their passports into the sea? Also, if you're undocumented and we don't know who you are, then when 95% are granted leave to remain, are they just given a new identity? It's an absolute shambles. Cannot disagree with that at all. We're going to talk in just a second about Palestine Action, also the Labour Council accused of sectarianism after twinning with a Palestinian city. Also Bob Vylan as well, the singer in Bob Vylan, Pascal Robinson Foster, who for some reason, which defies explanation, has still not been arrested nearly 2 weeks on from his absolutely vile tirade. He has said that maybe people shouldn't say it because, I don't know, calling for people to die and inciting violence, maybe that's not that good an idea. He's also not keen on people knowing his name. He wants to retain the shroud of mystery of being part of Bob Vylan, so definitely don't tell anybody that his name is Pascal Robinson Foster. Don't repeat that if you wouldn't mind. Stay with us here on Talk.
The problem is these refreshes, all you do is you store up problems on the back benches because you sack somebody, they go on the back bench and get people around them who are unhappy, and they become a focal point for dissent. So he'll be trying to avoid that. But there are all these different factions. You've got Wes Streeting, who sees himself as a sort of Blairite, and then you've got the left, who are all behind Angela Rayner. So you've got these different factions. He's got to try and he's got to tiptoe through this very carefully.
Starmer's been on Twitter this afternoon and said, I said we would break the business model of people smugglers. I meant it. Ooh, you're hard. So yeah, we'll see what actually happens. That's the slight issue there, isn't it? Thanks to Angela, who says, you speak much sense regarding the voting in the next election. In Leafy, Surrey, Tory voters went Liberal, a frightening thought that a Lib-Lab coalition, but you're right, the anti-Farage vote and smears will go into overdrive. I don't want to discourage or encourage people to vote for Reform UK. necessarily, but I'm telling you, the backlash is coming. It is coming to Reform UK. There's a lot of people who do not want Nigel Farage to be Prime Minister. There are powerful forces out there. I'm not talking about anything conspiratorial or sinister or, you know, anybody pulling the strings necessarily. I'm talking about a lot of people who don't want Nigel Farage to be Prime Minister and who will do an awful lot of things, including voting tactically, in order to prevent that. There's also a lot of the media that's really, really against him, that does not want Nigel Farage as Prime Minister. It's something we're going to continue to monitor and keep a close eye on here at Talk, where we are the home of common sense, the home of free speech as well. And Nigel Farage, people like Richard Tice, whoever wants to come on, they're welcome to do so. Similarly, from the other parties as well, to set out the stall. And actually, tomorrow morning, Jonathan Brash from Labour is going to be with me from 10 o'clock. So I'm on between 10 and 1 tomorrow. So let's hopefully you can join me for that. I want to talk now about Palestine Action and also the Labour Council accused of sectarianism over twinning with a Palestinian city. Did you have to twin with a Palestinian city? No, you did not. Also, Bob Villan as well, who has warned, "You'll get me in trouble," after a crowd has been chanting about what he did about the IDF. Let's just remind ourselves what Bob Villan has been saying.
And I can't give No, you're going to get me in trouble. You're going to get me in trouble. Apparently, every other chant is fine, and you lot will get me in trouble. Free, free! Free, free!
So that was Bob Villan there, or more accurately, Pascal Robinson Foster. Doesn't want people to know his name, Pascal Robinson Foster, so definitely don't repeat Pascal Robinson Foster if you're chatting to your friends or family. Nicole Lambert is with me, the journalist who keeps a very close eye on these things. He seems to have finally realised that actually chanting for the death of soldiers in Israel, maybe not the best idea, but 2 weeks on, he still hasn't been arrested. What's going on?
I don't think he's going to be arrested, even though it is calling for the death of people. And what we've seen happen, and the reason he knows he's in trouble, is that whatever he feels, that chant has now been repeated. We've seen it in Australia, where people attacked a Israeli restaurant, singing death to IDF. And we've seen it happening in other places too. So this has taken on a life of its own, whether he likes it or not. I think we talked about him last week or Monday, and I said I didn't think anything would happen because, to me, it doesn't seem like the police are that interested in fighting anti-Semitism or fighting people that want to see people like me dead.
You know, and I know, Nicole, that if he'd been chanting, for example, death, death to gay people, death, death to women, death, death to Muslims, death, death to trans people, that what would happen is that he would be arrested very quickly, he would be charged very quickly, and what the police would have been doing was finding people on Twitter, TikTok, other forms of social media who were putting out videos of it. They would arrest them as well. They would also be using facial recognition technology to look at the people who shouted back. And those are the people that I'm even more worried about than this clown, anti-Semitic clown, Pascal Robinson Foster. We know that those people who shouted it back would be arrested too, or at least spoken to by police. But somehow, because he's talking about Jewish people being dead and members of the Israeli Defence Force being dead, which is an army of conscripts, that's somehow okay. Do you think this just dies a death? Does it just go away, Nicole?
I think it will die a death, and it reminds me of what happened, and this was before the October 7 attacks. This was in 2021 when we had a convoy of people who were allowed to drive around Jewish areas for 2 hours. It was 2 or 3 cars singing, "We want to rape Jewish women, get your women," and all of this. And even though it was obvious who it was, there was plenty of video. There were never any there were charges, but they were never brought. It was never went to court, and that's what happened. And that's why actually you're seeing people like the Campaign Against Anti-Semitism having to take out private prosecutions against someone like Professor David Miller. He's a former professor from Bristol University, who's openly calling for Zionists to be attacked and for Jews, and he's naming schools, he's naming people like me. So these are dangerous people, but nothing seems to happen. The police don't seem to be interested. But I have to say, do I think that also as a woman, do I think that if he was calling for the death of women, would he be attacked? I don't know. Like, it does seem that there's one rule for some people and not for others, in that people that have called for the turf to be hurt or even to be punched, they seem to get off fine. Whereas if you go around with a sticker saying a woman is a human female, then you might have a knock on the door from the police.
Well, exactly. Tell us about this Labour Council accused of sectarianism over twinning with a Palestinian city. We've covered this story before, but further developments in the last few days.
Well, Brent Council is obviously known for being kind of a loony left council for as long as I've lived, I think. So now it seems to be led, certainly its leader and a big cohort of Muslim Labour councillors, and they are the ones that have chosen to twin with Nablus, which is in the West Bank, and half of the Nablus council are affiliated with Hamas, which is obviously a proscribed group. Jewish people and other people from the Brent area have complained, and there's been a petition of 1,500 people. There are around 6 synagogues in the area, plus Europe's biggest Jewish school. So it's an area filled with many Jews who are now very worried. Some Jewish leaders went to see the council, and they were basically came away feeling completely ignored. The council's own representatives have said this could cause anti-Semitism, but they are being ignored and told that this is actually for cohesion and inclusion.
Disgraceful. Inclusion by excluding many, many people and making them feel unsafe in their own homes. Absolutely outrageous. Tell us as well about these groups across the UK, in London and Manchester and Cardiff, and in Londonderry as well, in Northern Ireland, across the UK, going to define the ban on Palestine Action. It was designated as a terrorist grouping, was prescribed on Monday from midnight.
So Palestine Action is a group that has got increasingly more dangerous. I would say it started off with daubing paintings and attacking Jewish buildings, but it was prescribed after it attacked an RAF and attacked 2 planes, causing millions of pounds worth of damage. So it is prescribed, but what we're seeing now is people coming out saying, I am Palestine Action, and what they really want is a fight with the police. And I think the police has to show them at this point who is in charge, because we have seen terrorist support on our streets for months and for years now, since October 7 and even before. Now is the time. The government has laid down its mantle, as it were, and said, right, this is the line. You don't attack our own military. You don't attack our planes. If you do, you are a terrorist. Therefore, let's see what happens. Let's see whether the police actually does what it should do and arrest the people who are breaking the law.
Well, let's hope they do that. Nicole, always good to talk to you, the journalist Nicole Lambert there. Thank you for that. Thank you also to the person called TYY Hacha on, I'm not quite sure how you pronounce it, who says, you've made a stupid comment regarding Farage, saying the people like him and don't like him. Well, that applies to Starmer and Davy and Badenoch too. Come on, you're better than that as a political expert. The point I'm making, I suppose, and maybe I didn't make it particularly well, is that there are people who really like Nigel Farage, and actually we've looked up YouGov on the most recent statistics, and 96% of people in the UK know who Nigel Farage is. 37% of them like him, he is popular, and 40% dislike him, 19% are neutral. What I'm saying is, of those 40%, they have quite a strong opinion about him. Now, look, there are lots of people who have strong opinions, as this person correctly points out, in regard to Starmer, Davy, Badenoch and all the rest of it. But what I'm saying is that the backlash against Farage and the anti-Farage and anti-reform sentiment, we see it all the time. We see it from various people, we see it from various leaders. We saw it in the House of Commons the other day, and I don't think Nigel Farage would necessarily disagree with me on this point. He got up, as he has every right to do so, as the leader of one of the parties, to make a point and to ask the Prime Minister a question, and he was booed and jeered, and people behind him saying, will you just shut up, and all this kind of stuff. There's lots that was captured by the microphones there. What I'm saying is there will be a big and bigger than currently backlash if people really fear that he is to be the next Prime Minister. At the moment, those polls certainly showing Reform UK, they've been ahead in something like I think it was 57 polls I saw earlier, the last 57 polls, that there are lots and lots of polls that put Reform UK ahead. If it looks as though closer to the election that Reform UK could form the next government of this country, believe me, there will be an awful lot of people who will try to make that not happen. So TYY Hatcha, I'm not necessarily saying don't vote Reform UK. I'm not saying I don't like Nigel Farage or anything like that. I'm saying that if you look at this
polling, if you look at the fact that YouGov says that 40% of people dislike Nigel Farage, well, who are they going to vote for? And if they can be mobilised in some way, well, I think Farage could have problems. Just my thoughts on all of it. But listen, thank you very much for your message. And look, even if you disagree with me, even if you think I'm talking nonsense, that's fine. That's okay, because we're the home of free speech. And with free speech, people disagree with one another, and they disagree without being disagreeable. So thank you to everybody who does that. We'll come back in just a second with more of your thoughts, calls, comments, texts, voice notes. Let us know your thoughts. 0344 499 1000. Some breaking news now on Talk, and that is that Ian Blair has died. He's the former Commissioner of the Metropolitan Police. Lord Blair has died at the age of 72. He was the head of the Metropolitan Police from 2005 to 2008. He was in charge when the 7/7 bombings happened. That was, of course, 20 years ago this week. He was also controversial because the shooting of the totally innocent Jean-Charles de Menezes happened under his watch, and there was contradictory information that came out from the Metropolitan Police around that time. His career was ended when the then Mayor of London, Boris Johnson, said that he no longer had support for him. He failed to endorse him, and at that point, when the Mayor of London doesn't support you, you have to stand down. He was made a crossbench life peer in July 2010, so there's the breaking news that Ian Blair, the Lord Blair, has died, the former Metropolitan Police Commissioner. Thank you to everybody who has been in touch, including about Bob Villan. Good afternoon, Peter, says Stuart. I'm glad this talentless Pascal Robinson Foster is being named, but it would seem that not one journalist has been able to name the drummer, who apparently guards his true identity even more fiercely. It seems odd that anyone can literally be anonymous in this age of the internet. Well, we know Pascal Robinson Foster's name. If anybody does know the name of the drummer and can give us that information, I'd be very, very interested to receive it. Please don't just you take sort of things that have been put online. There has to be some proof of that, because we don't want to name someone who we don't like without being sure what their name is. We do, of course, know that Pascal Robinson Foster should be arrested. He should be arrested for incitement, he should be charged, and he should face the full force of the law. Because apparently Lucy Connolly, when she puts her tweets out, when she put that tweet out that she shouldn't have put out, that she took down, that I believe she should have received a police caution for, or some community service or something like that, should have been dealt with by saying, yeah, this was wrong, don't do it again, but nonetheless, you don't have to serve 31 months in prison. She is currently in prison, and Pascal Robinson Foster, who said death, death to the IDF and death to every IDF soldier, he's still at large. He's still no problems in his life, apart from the Americans very, very wisely saying that they don't want him to come over for his tour there. Another one, this Pascal incident is just another example of the two-tier policing and justice system we definitely have under Hermer and his lapdog Starmer. Has anyone raised an official complaint under the beloved Hate Speech Act? Talking about Richard Hermer there, who I think is the most dangerous man in government. He is the Attorney General. On Villain, Lucy Connolly was arrested, says Lorraine, held in remand, charged within 8 days. Why is Pascal Robinson Foster still free? Hermer, this is a great example of two-tier policing and justice, and no, I am not a Nazi. No one's saying you are, Lorraine. I am ashamed of how such anti-Semites calling for death to Israelis are allowed to act with impunity while our Jewish friends live in complete fear. Britain, we are a disgrace. Lorraine, very, very wise words there. Another person says, regarding Rayner, it's funny how a ministerial car and use of grace in favour of accommodation changes the socialist ideology. Mark in Croydon says, funny how the unions are starting to see this new Labour don't represent the traditional workers. They prefer appealing to a different voter base now. Let's speak to Robert in Nottingham, who's been in touch in regard to the migration deal. Robert's given me a ring on 0344 499 1000. You're very welcome to the programme, Robert. What would you like to say?
Hi, Peter. Yeah, I'm interested that Starmer used the word pilot.
Yeah.
Whereas any other person probably would have said test or trial. Maybe the implication is that a test or trial can be failed.
Mm-hmm.
So that's my first point. Macron saying that this was caused by Brexit, the immigration issue.
We were sold a lie, apparently.
Sorry?
We were sold a lie. That is what Macron said.
Well, that reminds me of when Obama said we have to wait in line. I suspect Starmer asked Macron to say that because he's very pro-EU. Final point, there's a difference between doing things right, which is management,
mm-hmm.
and doing the right thing, which is leadership.
Yeah.
And Starmer, to me, is a manager. Everything needs to be sort of bolted down in law and so on. And he just doesn't show any leadership.
I was talking to someone the other day, Robert, who had experience of being in rooms when Thatcher and Major made decisions. And what that person told me was that Thatcher would listen to every single person in the room, listen to all their different thoughts, and then come up with a solution. It might be one she'd heard, it might be one that she'd come up with herself, it might be something that she truly believed, and she would lead. The problem with Major is that he was a managerial person. He would just go with the idea he liked the best. And that, I think, is the problem with Starmer. He doesn't lead, he manages, and he's not managing very well, Robert.
Sadly, he's not, is he? I think one final point, I think you're right about Farage, although I'm quite a supporter of him, but I'm just wondering, did Thatcher have a lot of people who opposed her before she came to power? I'm not sure.
Not really as many. Now, certainly there were. I mean, look, the 70s were obviously a very, they called it the pendulum politics of the 70s, but there wasn't that sort of visceral hatred, was there? And she wasn't as known, I think, as Farage was at that stage. She was leader of the opposition, of course. She'd been Education Secretary, but
Good point. Yeah.
Well, it's an interesting one. Robert, thanks for your thoughts. Really appreciate them. Robert in Nottingham there. Let's go to Andrew in Hertfordshire. Andrew, what would you like to say? You're very welcome to the programme.
Yeah, it's very straightforward. When you talk about Starmer, what you've got there is a lawyer who looks at the rest of the world as if we're muggles. In relation to the migration...
Do you mean mugs rather than muggles?
Yes, well, it's from Harry Potter. All lawyers see and that's how they do. If you look at the migration and you talked about an event, the Notting Hill Carnival, 2 million undocumented people in an area with 7,000 policemen to look after.
They're not all undocumented, are they?
There's no ticket. It's a non-ticket event.
Okay.
Think about it. That epicenter of disorder will be the one that kicks off the summer like you've never seen. And we will go into a period of sustained... I don't want it any more than you do. But this government is not in a position to deal with it. And the greatest tragedy of all in all this is that there's a girl somewhere in a park who's now been surrounded by illegal... because migration is good, but illegal migration isn't, and I fear for her.
Okay.
And that's what's wrong about this.
Okay, Andrew, thanks for your thoughts. Appreciate that. That's Andrew in Hertfordshire. Thank you to the texter. He says, Labour were quick to say J.D. Vance should keep his nose out of UK politics regarding free speech, yet we're happy for Macron to criticise Brexiteers. Very interesting point there. Will Keir Starmer agree with... Nobody asked that question. Nobody asked that question at the press conference. Do you agree with
Macron when he says that Brexit was wrong, that we were sold a lie. Thank you to Alan in Staffordshire as well. He says, Peter, if you would like a totally different perspective on Le Grand Farce, you should catch up on the coverage of the state visit in France and across Europe. The big story was Ursula von der Leyen, Chesney Hawkes lookalike, getting a severe drubbing in the European Parliament, although she narrowly avoided losing the vote. I have actually been following that. It's not the one and only confidence vote that's been against Chesney Hawkes lookalike Ursula von der Leyen either. Starmer is overplayed, says Alan. The soft power of the King, Canada, France and Zelensky have all had visits, stays and meetings long before this masterstroke of the Trump visit, says Alan in Staffordshire. So thank you for that, Alan. Lots to discuss next. We are going to talk to Joe Wheeler because it's very hot. Also to remind you the breaking news that the Metropolitan Police Commissioner, formerly Lord Blair, Ian Blair, has died. He was head of the Metropolitan Police between 2005 and 2008. We'll talk to Joe in a second. We'll take more of your calls, text, tweets, send your voice notes as well. 0344 499 1000.
What we're talking about here, 50 a week, something like that.
Yeah, 50 is 50 a week. Yeah.
It's 50 a week. Okay, you said today there's about over 700.
We think 700 a day, 2,599 last week. Think about that.
So it's anything up to 1,000 a day, right, at the moment.
Yeah.
Now, how the hell have we got here? Because in 2018, it was around the number of migrants crossing the Channel was 299 for the year.
Well, you might have noticed, I certainly did when I was on the tube in London today, that it is very hot. We're having another heat wave. It's gripping the UK. Joe Wheeler is with us, meteorologist with Square Raindrop. I despise, with the heat of 1,000 suns, most meteorologists and weather forecasters, but I love Joe Wheeler. Joe, tell us what's happening.
It's warm.
It is. That's it. Thanks, Joe. Good to talk to you. Cheerio. No, tell us more. Tell us more.
It's not as warm as it was the last time round. We're not seeing temperatures exceeding 35.8, which is the record so far. What we are seeing is the heat being more evenly distributed. So parts of Ireland are warm, you'll be glad. I called my friend yesterday. She basically put the phone down on me because she's going, the weather's nice, I have to go.
Not talking to you anymore. It's too warm.
I'm going to go and enjoy this. Scotland also is warm. They've seen around 30, what have they seen today? 28.9 at a Boyne. So it is lovely and warm, it really is. And it will kind of break down on Monday in a showery breakdown. But the heat doesn't go very far away. I think we'll see the warm weather coming back. So the fact that we've seen such a long spell of dry weather and we've seen, very high temperatures is going to make it an interesting year.
There's been hosepipe bans already in near you, Yorkshire. I know you're Lincolnshire, but near in Yorkshire.
2 huge counties, but yeah, I get
yes, near in the sense that like France is near me.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, and I think that's probably quite a sensible thing. I mean, going back to March, and parts of the northeast only saw about 5 millimetres of rain in the entire month, which is, quite shocking. Whereas parts of Cornwall saw 229% of their average monthly rainfall. So there's a disparity here, but it doesn't mean to say the rain isn't there. It just needs sensibly using. And people need to be sensible as well. We know that there hasn't been any rain. I mean, I live in Lincolnshire, it's an agricultural county, and so obviously they need the water for the farmland. And there are all sorts of measures in place, and they're very careful with water. But, we can personally be sensible. I mean, you won't remember 1976 because you're just a wee lad. Yeah, but they said.
Surely you don't either, Joe. You've read about it in history books.
I have read about it in history books, but I believe that they did say at the time, best thing to do is to shower with a friend, and I'll go with that.
Okay, well, Joe, I think we should leave it there. But actually, sorry, I should ask you just before you go, in regard to you saying the heat sort of goes away from Monday, or at least the heat wave kind of ends by that stage. We get a bit more rain and so on. I mean, can we see? Will the temperatures go down significantly? Will it be cold to this time next week, or just to sort of more reasonable and manageable for people like me summer temperatures?
Yeah, well, you're Irish. Yeah, you're not used to it. The temperatures will dip for a while, but I have to say they don't look like they go very far for very long.
Okay.
And we start to see those levels coming back up. And interestingly, the long-range forecast, and I'm meaning the long-range forecast, we're looking now into August, shows high pressure coming back. So I don't see the heat or the settled conditions going away for too long at any stage.
Okay.
Obviously, these things are subject to change. I should just mention the fact there's a heat alert out. Obviously, this is not usually for public consumption, but, be sensible in the warm. I'm not a great fan of the heat. I'm not a sun worshipper. And I went out for about 10 minutes yesterday and I came and went, I think I'll leave that.
Yeah, well, indeed. That's why you're showering with a friend. That's the reason. Joe, thank you very much indeed. That's Joe Wheeler there, meteorologist with Square Raindrop and advocate of showering with a friend. Daniel is in Worcester and has given me a ring on 0344 499 1000. Daniel, what are your thoughts this evening? What would you like to say?
Well, all I'm thinking about is the children. Who's keeping them cool when they're in their schools and they are struggling to play outside? Who's looking after them?
Look, I played outside as a kid in all weathers, in the heat and all the rest.
But heat of all, we are the adults. Who's looking after them when they're outside?
Well, hopefully the teachers are saying put on some sunscreen if you're going to be out for any length of time.
They're never going to get that. They play around, they jump about, and they get heat stroke. There's nobody really protecting them.
Well, I think the teachers are probably protecting them. But anyway, Daniel, I don't think you gave us a ring about that. What would you like to say?
Well, if I'm trying to say something, why is it? You were talking earlier about the immigrants on the boats.
Yes.
And I tried to make a comment about that. And I tried to make a comment. Who is the one complaining about these, Mr. Farage, what he's saying about these boats? Who are the ones that's making complaints about him? Are the immigrants? Are they the boat people? Are they the government? That's my point. That's my point.
Well, there's a lot of people who don't like Nigel Farage and don't like what he's saying.
No, I didn't say I didn't like what Nigel Farage. Maybe all his points aren't great, but 90% of what he says is what the people believe in.
Yeah, that's fine, but it's not everybody, Daniel. There are a lot of people who do support Nigel Farage, and he's done really, really well. We know in the local election, for example, he's got 4 MPs at the moment. There'll be more to come, I would imagine, in 2029.
Can I ask you a civil question?
Yeah.
Would you support him?
Nigel Farage?
Yes.
I don't think I can see myself voting Reform UK.
You never answered the question. That was ER. I would 100%.
Okay, well, I've just answered your Daniel. I've just answered your question. I've just answered your question.
Sorry. I beg your pardon.
Okay,
yes,
all right.
Thank you.
I don't see myself voting Reform UK at the next election, but I've no real idea who I'm going to vote for. I feel very politically homeless at the moment.
Oh, bless you. You're a good man.
What about you, Daniel?
Your station. Do you know, I've only got 2 stations, yours and, talk radio, the talk this one, and the other one. Anyway,
the other one we don't mention.
Anyway, there's only 2 stations.
Oh, okay.
I don't listen to BBC or ITV, only 2 stations.
Okay.
Who what they are.
Well, Daniel,
because
thank
they're
you.
Honest.
Okay, well, thanks.
You're honest.
Thanks, Daniel. Thank you for your kind words there. I appreciate that. Clive in Solihull says, vote Reform, great show. In my opinion, Nigel Farage is a traditional Conservative. I'm 60 and I remember what that means. These days, it means you're a right-wing extremist. Not so. I just care about my country and worry that we are importing people that hate our way of life and will not integrate with our values. There could be trouble ahead. Starmer hasn't got a clue about anything. And Rich, who's in London, says, Peter, Trump is in the White House now with a huge majority in spite of huge attacks on him before the US election. Court cases, attempts on his life, and the press constantly attacking him. So Nigel also has a big chance of winning in spite of the lefty backlash. Rich, that is a very, very good point. The thing is that, as I said earlier on, when we were looking at some of those polling, it's only a snapshot of what people think of that particular time. But nonetheless, there are an awful lot of people who don't like Nigel Farage. They don't like Reform UK. Lots of people who do like him, many of whom watch and listen to this station. And Rob, it's a very fair point, but at the same time, the electoral system is very, very different as well. So what you need is a lot of evenly spread votes. And what's interesting, I find, as a political nerd, is when you look at the number of votes. So certainly in America, you had the popular vote and the electoral college. Those are 2 different things. But here as well, we had 3.5 million people voting for the Liberal Democrats in the 2024 election. 72 seats came the Liberal Democrats' way. Far more than that, 600,000 extra people voted for Reform UK. 4.1 million people voted for Reform UK. They got 5 seats at the last general election. Things have changed a bit since then. Sarah Puchin's been elected, Rupert Lowe's gone, James McMurdoch has gone as well, so they have 4 MPs at the moment. But it is a fascinating system, and I think, politics is never dull. It's certainly not dull at the moment. And I think the next few years are going to be full of opportunity for Nigel Farage and many others as well. Lots to discuss. We're going to speak to former Conservative MP Nick Fletcher, rumoured to be someone who is being courted by Reform UK. We'll talk to him about migration. We'll also talk to Simon Diggins as well about the UK's F-35 fighter jets being grounded by a lack of spares and engineers, and take a sneak peek inside the Sun newspaper. John Lucas, the night news editor, will be with us. It's a great story about a man who drove off from a petrol station forgetting something quite important. Stay with us here on Talk and let us know your thoughts. 0344 499 1000. Good evening, this is Talk Drive. Thank you so much for your company. If you're one of the car dwellers heading home in your car, you're very, very welcome to the programme. Maybe you're sitting at home watching, whatever you're up to today in the sunshine or out of the sunshine, you're very welcome to the programme. I'm here between now and 7. Kevin O'Sullivan will be here between 7 and 9 in this studio. And then what just happened, of course, between 9 and 10. And I'm back tomorrow and Sunday between 10 and 1. Before 7, we're going to talk about the shambles as hundreds of grinning, dingy migrants arrive in the UK, blowing Keir Starmer's humiliating small boots plan out of the water. We'll speak to the former Conservative MP Nick Fletcher in a minute, rumoured to be someone being courted by Reform UK. We know Sir Jake Berry has joined Reform UK as well this week. We'll also talk about Richard Tice criticising the King. He's the Deputy Leader of Reform UK as well. And Angela Rayner being suspended from a Labour union because of the bin strike chaos in Birmingham. That still goes on remarkably 6 months on. Also, the Royal Navy scrapping 2 warships as Britain's fleet shrinks to the smallest in 500 years. We'll also take a look inside the Sun tomorrow with John Lucas, who's the night news editor. Fascinating stories, including one about a dad on holiday driving almost 200 miles before remembering he'd left something very important at the petrol station. We'll hear all about that in a few minutes' time. As always, plenty of time to get your thoughts on the air as well. You know me, I love speaking to people who ring in. That's the preferred method of communication, 0344 499 1000. You can also text me, 87222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV. Follow me, please, at Peter Cardwell. You can send me a WhatsApp voice message, less than a minute, please, otherwise Tech Up Dave gets annoyed. Or you can send me a WhatsApp text message, or indeed give me a ring on that main number. All 3 of those on the main number, 0344 499 1000. Plenty to discuss between now and 7. Stay with us here on Talk. Well, a busy weekend ahead and lots to discuss on my programmes over the weekend between 10 and 1. Jonathan Brash will be joining me at 10 o'clock tomorrow, the Labour MP, and Chris Philp, the Shadow Home Secretary, on Sunday. For the meantime, let's speak to Nick Fletcher, who is a former Conservative MP. Nick, thank you for joining me this evening. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well. And you?
Yes, very well, thank you. What do you make of this migration plan from Keir Starmer? Just before I get your thoughts, perhaps we can remind ourselves of the deal that he set out yesterday.
So I'm pleased to announce our agreement today on a groundbreaking returns pilot. For the very first time, migrants arriving via small boat will be detained and returned to France in short order. In exchange for every return, a different individual will be allowed to come here via a safe route, controlled and legal, subject to strict security checks, and only open to those who have not tried to enter the UK illegally.
But the Prime Minister refused to say which migrants would actually be sent back. Let's hear the clip about that.
Operationalised in coming weeks, so that is a good thing. It is, of course, a pilot. It is there to prove the concept that if you come over by small boats, then you will be returned to France. Of course, being a pilot, it is very important that it works, and we need to make sure that it does work. And if it works, what it does is break the model, and that's the only way in the end to stop this vile trade. And so that's why this is a real breakthrough moment today. As I say, many governments have tried to get this far and have failed to do so. In terms of those that will be returned, I'm not going to go into the details of that because that has the potential to undermine how this will operate.
Keir Starmer speaking there yesterday. Nick, what do you make of what he said there? He kept saying groundbreaking. It's a groundbreaking scheme. It's going to break the model. Everything's going to be absolutely amazing. Is it?
No. Quite simply, no. It's a shambles. Have you noticed that every time they actually get a minister in front of the camera at the moment, they always say, well, we can't go into the details.
Yes. Why not? Why not? Why couldn't he give us the detail of how this is going to work?
What on earth is the point in coming on these shows? What on earth is the point of press conferences? They can't give the details. But exactly the same in Doncaster. We've suffered under Labour for 50 years. The country is now suffering what we've had to put up with. It's an absolute disgrace. The boats will keep on coming until we actually leave the ECHR and literally protect our borders like we should do as a country. It's the only thing that we can do. The deterrent that we had was the Rwanda plan. It was going to work. He scrapped it on the first day as he came in. He never gave it a chance. The problems that we had with it relate to the fact that we are still signed up members of the ECHR. That's what we need to do. Leave the ECHR, put a British Bill of Rights in place, and then protect our borders. And that way we will stop our boats. But France is just laughing at us, and that is disgraceful. A European ally, supposedly, literally laughing at us.
And saying that we were sold a lie with Brexit, Nick?
Yeah, that is a complete lie, in which they've said they'll be referring to the Dublin Agreement, which, when we were part of the European Union, we could send people back, but we very rarely ever did. I think we sent 260 people back while that agreement was in place, and we actually had to take some during that period as well, because we'd signed up to that. So there was some that had obviously left, gone out of the UK, and then had to come back to the UK. So that was a complete and utter farce. People love blaming Brexit. They've never got over the fact that the people of this country decided to leave, and every time, every opportunity that they have to blame Brexit, they do. I'm surprised they're not blaming the sunshine and too much hot weather on Brexit. They seem to blame it for everything else.
I think you're absolutely right about that. It's interesting, though, some polling saying that Reform UK supporters would back Labour if Keir Starmer actually ends the small boats crisis. I mean, it's a big F, isn't it?
I think that's an extremely big if. I mean, I don't know where they get that polling from. It's not just on the immigration issues that they're destroying this country. I run a small business, small to medium-sized business, and I speak to lots of business people across the Doncaster in my area. And the national insurance increases and the lowering of the threshold, it's crippling businesses. It's literally crippling it. But these people on that front bench have never, ever actually run a business, never actually worked in a proper business, not one single person on that front bench. If there were Scrabble pieces, you'd throw them all back in and hope you wouldn't pull one of them back out again. And we are being run by these people. They are literally destroying our country.
That is a great line, Nick. If they're Scrabble pieces, you would throw them back in. I'm going to use that again. Your fee will be 0p. What do you make as well of the King's role in all of this? Richard Tice, the Deputy Leader of Reform UK, has criticised the King, saying he's become too political in what was said at the state banquet. What do you make of this, Nick?
Yeah, I'll be completely honest with you. I don't really know what was said there. I do think that our king, especially when before he became king, was quite outspoken, and there was a lot there that I didn't particularly agree with.
The king said these challenges. He wasn't specifically talking about migration necessarily, but he was talking about various challenges. No borders, no fortress can protect us against them this time. Instead, the answer lies in partnership, and we, France and Britain, must help to lead the way. Our two nations share not only values but also the tireless determination to act on them in the world. And Richard Tice says he's not sure the king got the balance right. He said it was unwise for the king to use any of the language about the boats, and he said that, for example, the Queen Elizabeth II wouldn't have used the same language.
I think he's probably right there. I think he definitely is. Look, the partnership that he's talking about there, partnerships only work when it's 50-50, and unfortunately it's not. And I'm telling you now, the people of France and many of these European countries are laughing at us. They could stop these boats. They put in a new rule the other week, I believe, where they could go out into the water the first 300 metres and actually cut the boat so that the boat sank while the people were still safe to bring back in. That's the sort of initiative that we should be looking at. But unfortunately, what you've got is you've got millions and millions of pounds going over to France to be spent on people there to help stop these boats, and they're not doing the job. They are just laughing at us. That's what's happening.
Nick, there's a report in the Times today that says Reform UK is targeting more than half a dozen former Conservative MPs as potential defectors. Sir Jake Berry, of course, the former Conservative chairman, on Wednesday became the most high-profile defector. Your name's on the list here: Miriam Cates, Nick Fletcher, you, Jonathan Gullis, Tom Hunt, Brendan Clark-Smith, Robin Miller, Jane Stevenson and Damien Moore. Have you been approached by Reform UK to defect?
No, I haven't. And you've got a list there of fine Conservative members of Parliament, or was, all good friends of mine and all people that should be down in Parliament. Unfortunately, Nigel Farage decided to stand candidates up against people like myself and Miriam, and not against Ed Miliband, which I find absolutely disgraceful. He stood candidates up who didn't want to win, but they took enough votes off me for me to lose. And the reason why we've got such a Labour government doing so much damage is because there's so few opposition, and unfortunately when you do get rebels, there's not enough of them a lot of the time. So this Labour government have been able to put through an awful lot. I mean, it just proves how tragic they are with the majority that they've got, that they couldn't get the welfare bill through last week. But unfortunately, as I say, because Reform stood against Brendan, against myself, against Miriam, we lost our seat. So, I mean, I'm disappointed with Reform. They know that we were a good Conservative MPs. They know we agreed with an awful lot of their policies, and yet they still stood against us and left people like Ed Miliband to win their seats, which so it doesn't make sense to me.
Would you rule out ever joining Reform UK?
There's 4 years between now and the general election, and I do believe at some point there will be some work done between the Conservative Party and Reform. I'm sure that will happen. I mean, I specifically said that Nigel Farage should have stood in Doncaster as a Conservative MP and been a Home Secretary, and that way would have been able to appease all the people who are so upset with what's happening with the boats. There's an awful lot of the policies that they align with Conservatives. I mean, I do think some of the welfare and some of the spending commitments that they're talking about are unfunded, and they've obviously got problems. They've had 6 MPs, they've had 2 leave. So look, there's an awful lot that's happening at the moment. Obviously, I get lots of people, especially local, saying to me, "Are you going to join Reform?" But look, I'm quite happy with the Conservative Party, the Conservative Party that we've got. I think Kemi is the only one at the moment who's actually speaking any sense. We just need people to listen.
She's not going to be the next Prime Minister, though, is she, Nick?
I don't know about that. I don't know. But I do want people to actually listen instead of just writing it off. And it's very difficult when you've got somebody as charismatic as Nigel Farage with 1.5 million followers on social media saying he's going to destroy the Conservative Party. It's quite funny, actually. He wants to destroy the Conservative Party, but he seems to want to take everybody in from the Conservative Party. I mean, one of his best MPs, I believe, Sarah Poachin, she's actually a Conservative councillor.
Yeah, she was for a long time. Yeah,
and the first MP was Lee Anderson, who was a good friend of mine and a colleague of mine, and obviously it was extremely disappointing when Lee went over to.
He was Labour before as well. He was Labour, then he was Conservative, then he lost the whip, and then he became Reform UK.
I understand, but I'm not going to sit here and say negative things about friends of mine and colleagues of mine. Look, politics is as it is. The country are obviously extremely upset with the way things are. We should have repealed an awful lot of what Labour put in, and we didn't. Okay. There's lots of excuses, but we didn't. And obviously Labour have come in, and they are literally destroying this country every single day that they're in power. We need to get them out. We need to get a good Conservative government in, and if we can do something with Reform, we can bring the people with us, then we'll have a proper mandate to go forward and make Britain great again.
Nick, thank you. That's Nick Fletcher there, former Conservative MP. Doesn't sound as if he's necessarily joining Reform UK, but he says there are certain things that perhaps Reform and the Conservatives could work together on. Very interesting thought in that. It's interesting when people always talk about these, coalitions or deals or electoral pacts or whatever. I can certainly see what's in it for the Conservatives, who are languishing at about 16% in some polls. I can't really see what's in it for Reform UK, unless that would put them over the threshold to get a majority government, which I think you probably just do that deal after an election. But anyway, interesting thoughts from Nick there. Doesn't sound as if he's going to join Reform UK anytime soon. Some of us, says Glyn, can recall 1976, and Dennis Howell, the Minister for Rain. I met him in the pub, Dartmoor Maiden, of an evening. I swam every day for 3 weeks off Medford Beach in Torquay, removing my 3-piece suit. This climate change nonsense is based on an unverified and seemingly unverifiable set of statistics. Leslie says, children need sunshine. Rickets will make a comeback if we keep mollycoddling kids. Much better to be outside than inside on games. Jane says, I will always remember Nick Fletcher in Parliament when he wanted a minister for men. I thought it was a great idea because male mental health is under-discussed, especially suicide rates. Should be talked about a lot more. Jane, you're absolutely right. We do talk about it on my programme from time to time. Perhaps we should revisit that before too long. And Graham in Bushy says, what would actually be groundbreaking is for Keir Starmer to actually answer a question. Interesting thought there. I'm sure it'll never catch on. We're going to talk in a second about the state of our military. The Royal Navy scrapping 2 warships as Britain's fleet shrinks to its smallest in 500 years. Also, F-35 fighter jets grounded by a lack of spares and engineers. Yes, really. Britain 2025. We're spending so much money on the military. Keir Starmer wants that to be 5% of what the country makes, of GDP, gross domestic product. We'll find out what Simon Diggins thinks in just a second.
What we're talking about here, 50 a week, something like that.
Yeah, 50 to 50 a week. Yeah.
It's 50 a week. Okay, you said today there's about over 700.
We think 700 a day, 2,599 last week. Think about that.
So it's anything up to 1,000 a day, right, at the moment.
Yeah.
Now, how the hell have we got here? Because in 2018, it was around the number of migrants crossing the Channel was 299 for the year.
Well, thank you to everybody who's been in touch, including Angie, who says, every time you have Nick Fletcher on, I like him more and more. He speaks so much sense. Also, Lee says, strong words from Nicole Lampert a little bit earlier on. That's the journalist who was talking to us about so many anti-Semitic things happening. If police don't enforce the law, what is the point? Yeah, I mean, there's some really, really good instances there of comments, including from Taff and Dover, who says, afternoon, Peter, regarding the former Tory MP, that's Nick Fletcher, does he remember that it was the Conservatives that didn't stand down for the Brexit Party in 2019? Yeah, look, this war of words will continue, certainly in regard to what happened in 2019 and 2024. No love lost between Nigel Farage and Boris Johnson, certainly. Ian says, I have a message for Nick. I will never vote Conservative again. The arrogance, Nick needs to realise the wasted vote was to vote for the Tories, not Reform UK, says Ian. I want to talk now about the state of our military, because there are a number of things happening. The Royal Navy has scrapped 2 warships as Britain's fleet shrinks to its smallest in 500 years. The UK's F-35 fighter jets have been grounded by a lack of spares and engineers as well. I just wonder what's going on, especially in the context of the fact that military spending is increasing to such a huge degree. No better guide through all of this than Colonel Simon Diggins, who's a military and defence analyst and former senior officer, of course, in the UK Army. Simon, what is going on?
Peter, good evening to you. I think what we're dealing with now
is the consequences of years and years of underinvestment. It is absolutely true, as you said, that defence expenditure is rising and is due to rise even further, but that can't make up for what hasn't been spent in the past. I think the loss of the opportunity to have ships deployed into the Gulf is really very telling indeed. The situation in the Gulf is still unstable. One of the options the Iranians have is to lay mines, and one of the vessels we are withdrawing is a mines countermeasure vessel, which interestingly is one of the sort of niche capabilities that we have rather better than the Americans have got, and the Americans have always relied upon us for our effective mine countermeasures. So I think this is really telling about what's going on. The detail on the F-35 space, I don't have much detail on that. I'm imagining that one of the issues is F-35s by the US and indeed Israelis have been heavily used. It may just be a kind of worldwide shortage of that particular spare. But again, the fact we don't have the resilience, we don't have the spares in the background, I think tells us something about the failure of our defence procurement over the past, frankly, decades.
And we know, Simon, don't we, that there are so many of these, many senior military figures, people like yourself and even higher ranking than you, have said, people who've been head of the army and so on, it occasionally happens. These small coterie of people do exist. But they've been saying, for example, we've had people like Lord Dannett, for example, saying that just if we did go to war as a country, we just wouldn't be able to last for any length of time. Just the manpower, the equipment, the fatigue that would set in because there are so few people. Yet, of course, Keir Starmer wants to raise the amount of money we spend on our military to 5%. And I mean, that's going to be a very gradual change, isn't it? But all of what we're talking about today with the F-35s, for example, and the Navy ships as well, feeds into what those officers have been saying.
No, unfortunately, that is exactly the situation. And the rhetoric is still large. We've got Keir Starmer and we've got our leaders still talking large about 5%. Bear in mind that 1.5% of that 5% is supposed to be on defence infrastructure or national security infrastructure, and there's a whole load of stuff on net zero being loaded into that on the ground.
That's right, actually. Someone told me that the entire budget of the Department for Science, Innovation and Technology is also part of that number. So it's not as if all 5% is going to be used on, men and munitions, essentially.
No, I mean, what they're saying is that by 2035, 3.5% of that 5% will be spent on the defence budget. So very, very gradual rise. And again, we're going to look at it against the context. And the context says we've got an ongoing issue in the Gulf, in which we are involved. We've also got a war in Europe. We have Putin basically conducting over the last weekend the very largest ever drone attack on Kiev and Ukraine that's taken place, and with clear ambitions to take back territories that were lost at the end of the Cold War. We're not running to a Treasury timetable. The world is moving much faster than that, and there's simply been no recognition amongst the Treasury, amongst Whitehall generally, actually this slow burn process to 5%, of which only 3.5 by 2035 is in any way adequate. It really isn't. We are staring defeat in the face if we are pushed, and I think that's an awful place for us to be as a country.
On Monday, MPs are going to debate a petition relating to the prosecution of veterans of Operation Banner, which was, of course, the over 30 years that the military were deployed to Northern Ireland. And John Lamont MP, is a member of the Petitions Committee, has been asked to open the debate. MPs from all parties can take part. The government are going to send a minister to respond, and this is an attempt to protect Northern Ireland veterans from prosecutions. It's a huge policy area. When I was at the Northern Ireland office as a special advisor, it was a big issue then. Legacy is what it's called, and there are people who worry, I expect you're one of them, Simon, about sort of dawn raids on elderly former soldiers for things that some of them, of course, broke the law, not very many, but some. And we know that there are others who have been prosecuted for things that have subsequently been dropped, and that they were following orders to actually carry out in the troubles in Northern Ireland.
No, absolutely. I mean, we know that some individuals broke the law, but they are minimal. A very senior officer does some analysis on this, and he concluded there were 3 specific cases where that had taken place over the many hundreds of thousands of British soldiers who were deployed. All other operations conducted in line with the law. I mean, if you're talking about special forces operations particularly, they were signed off at the very highest levels by the General Officer Commanding Northern Ireland and by the head of the Northern Ireland Police Force, and often by the Secretary of State himself. The operations are conducted in accordance with the rule of law, and then they're investigated afterwards. But it's not just about the veterans of the past, though this is clearly the highlight of the issue in the petition on Monday, but it sets a tone for the future. And one of the reasons the government's got a problem is that it can't recruit at the moment. It cannot recruit enough forces to actually fill the gaps. On the current rate of the difference between our recruitment and our retention, we'll be down to an army of 60,000 by 2030, and again against the context of background. And one of the reasons for it is, frankly, people are going, do you know what, I'm not safe.
Well, in 30 or 40 years, if you're going to get a knock at your door for doing something that you were told to do, there are bad apples, but there's no doubt about that. There are things that happened in the dirty war that shouldn't have happened. We know, of course, that the vast majority of people who served in uniform in Northern Ireland, whether they were in the army, in the Royal Military Police, in the RUC, they served with great bravery and distinction. But in terms of actually this prosecution bill and what is happening with the Legacy Act, Labour have said they're going to repeal it, but a flawed piece of legislation originally from the Conservatives is what many people argue as well.
Yeah, it's interesting. What is worse, they're not even planning to repeal it. What they're trying to do is use is a sort of what they call a Henry VIII power of rescission, whereby effectively they administratively remove the protection clauses from the 2023 Act, therefore opening up the dam again to allow prosecutions. And the information we have is there could be 1,000 potential prosecutions of armed forces personnel as a result of that. There are no prosecutions, by the way, of terrorists coming anywhere near, or former terrorists, but 1,000 prosecutions. So, but they're not even have the courage to come to the House of Parliament and say the 2023 Act is wrong. We now need to look at this again and do it properly. As I say, they intend to do it through a piece of administrative legislation, which it's called rescission, which effectively just removes the clauses and makes them null and void, and does not require a proper debate in the House of Commons. So it's not only wrong, it's also, frankly, the way they're doing about it is cowardly and disgraceful. I mean, it is absolutely shocking, and it's no wonder, therefore, that people are concerned that we cannot trust the government to look after our forces and our personnel.
Simon, thank you. That's Simon Diggins there, Colonel Simon Diggins, military and defence analyst, and of course former senior member of the UK Army. Lots to discuss in all of this. Let me know your thoughts. 0344 499 1000. We'll take a sneak peek inside the sun in a second. John Lucas, the night news editor, is with us to let us know what's coming up in the paper tomorrow, and you're definitely going to want to hear. Well, there's a very interesting story about the Beckhams, actually, but there's one particularly good story I'm very much looking forward to talking about a dad on holiday driving almost 200 miles before remembering he left something very important at a petrol station. We'll find out what in just a second. Stay with us here on Talk.
Thank you to Paul in Belfast, who says it's not just the Navy, look at the Army. I left the Army after 33 years in 2016, multiple bravery awards, MBEs, mostly on special duties. The reason was that the blob took control of the MOD, Army HQs everywhere, civil servants and lawyers took over everything, and since then it's become 10 times worse. Well, I know a lot of military families, a lot of people who've served in the military, and people who are serving our country at this moment in uniform listen and watch to this station. So if you have any thoughts on what Simon is saying, we've got 27 minutes between now and 7 o'clock, and I'll happily take your calls or your messages, and I'm happy to anonymise them as well if you are serving in uniform at the moment. I don't want to get anybody in trouble. So 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can send me a text on 87222 as well. Right then, John Lucas is with us. Hi John, how are you doing? You all right?
Yeah, very
Night
well.
news editor at The Sun. Tens of thousands of Oasis fans basking in the 30-degree heat. Oasis coming home to Manchester.
Yeah, here we go. So this is the biggest comeback tour of all time. It continues. We had the start of it last week in Cardiff, but this is really the big one for a lot of Oasis fans. It's the homecoming back to Heaton Park. It's where they last played together in Manchester back in 2009, before it all sort of went pear-shaped. It's going to be about 80,000 people at these gigs, so they're playing 5 over a week. It's absolutely boiling outside.
The heat is on in Heaton.
The heat is on in Heaton, absolutely. And people have been queuing up that have been warned to prepare for this sort of extreme heat. But also, there's a big warning that people are planning to try and jib the gates, essentially. We've seen it at the football over the last couple of years, people trying to steam through or climb over. We've sort of uncovered these TikTok accounts showing people how to do it, but the organisers and the police say, look, we've got 2,000 stewards.
Don't muck about.
Don't muck about. We've got coppers everywhere. You're not going to get in that way. So we'll hope to see. I mean, hopefully there won't be too much trouble. It's a massive occasion for Oasis fans and for the city.
A lot of people are going to listen outside the gates as well.
People have been listening outside the gates, yeah. You're going to be able to hear it. And if you're travelling on the tram in Manchester on the way to these gigs, you're going to hear announcements by Liam Gallagher saying, you know, the next stop is Heaton. I'm not going to do the voice.
Right, yes.
But he's saying, come on, move it, and all this kind of stuff. Classic Liam sort of swagger as you're going about your journey. It's going to be a lot of fun. But it does all sort of play into this weather.
Yes.
So, yeah, obviously it's hot there, it's hot everywhere. We've had these amber heatwave warnings, so over the weekend we could have pressure on the on health services, on power supply, they've said. And there's just like sort of blanket warnings about wild swimming in the sea. We've already had a couple of incidents, sadly, this summer, as you always do. So we've had warnings about that, and obviously classic hosepipe bans.
Yeah, that's right.
So we've got it in
Yorkshire.
Yeah, absolutely, and they're bringing it in South East water. So we're going to have this in Kent and Sussex as well. That will come in from next week. So yeah.
On foreign affairs, lots to preview. Certainly, Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump both taking action in regard to Ukraine, by the look of things. Tell us about that.
Yeah, well, a lot of focus has been on the Middle East, quite rightly, the last couple of months. Israel, Iran, Gaza, all that stuff. Now, Donald Trump, whether you agree with it, rightly or wrongly, he's sort of been put up for this Nobel Peace Prize. Over that. Now, he seems to be shifting his attention back to Russia. So we've seen in the last 24 hours what's been billed as the worst Russian drone attack on Ukraine. And what we're finding out is that Putin wants to launch, he's targeting 1,000 drones a day that he essentially wants to drop on. It's all on civilian areas, you know, they're not military targets. And these drones are, it's sickening really, they're filled with shrapnel. So you remember the old IRA bombs that we used to have, so it's got screws, ball bearings, all this sort of stuff, and they're falling all over Ukraine. Luckily, well, not luckily, but because the West has helped supply Ukraine with defensive weapons, a lot of them are getting shot down. But we've seen a maternity hospital, horrible pictures from there today, having to be evacuated with all these little babies. I mean, obviously completely innocent little kids. And Trump today has reversed this blockage or suspension of sending weapons to Ukraine, and he's come out and he said, look, you know, we're gonna take Putin on. We're going to be a lot tougher with Putin. I think he's played this hardball game with the Russians because he always thinks he can negotiate, but what he's found is Putin's just hardballed him, and hopefully, attention's going to turn back to Ukraine, and we'll get some sort of movement there in terms of holding the Russians back a bit more.
From geopolitics to the arguably slightly less important story about Brooklyn Beckham and his wife Nicola Peltz blindsided after saying Romeo and Cruz had blocked them on social media. The war of the Beckhams appears to continue. We know, of course, that Beckham's big birthday, there were many questions over that, who was going to attend and not attend. Tensions between Brooklyn and his parents, of course.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, look, we do it all, from the big geopolitics down to the showbiz stuff.
The whole thing.
There's always a market for it. These guys, obviously Beckham and Victoria, are big superstars in their day, still are, the top of the A-list. But their kids have got these big social media followings themselves. There's hundreds of thousands of people following and invested in their lives. And so Brooklyn married this Nicola Peltz, so she's a heiress to a very, very vast fortune, much richer than the Beckhams. And a lot of these rows apparently seem to come down to money, so that the Peltz family don't feel that the Beckhams have necessarily chipped in enough cash when they've bought their houses. What the Beckhams say is, well, we're self-made, we don't want to just hand everything to our kids.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the kids probably do all right from the parents.
Yes.
But you can sort of see the point. But anyway, it's very sad when you have these sorts of falling out with brothers. So you've got Romeo and Cruz, they've unfollowed Brooklyn and his wife today. That's apparently left them completely blindsided. Romeo posted a video of Justin Bieber's song Walking Away on his Instagram story and said, just captioned it, yep. And that comes after Cruz had mocked Brooklyn last month. Someone had posted, he was moving into a music career, and someone had posted, oh, are you going to stick with this job, or are you going to become a race car driver or something? And Cruz had replied, no, wrong brother, mate. So it's horrible, and it's horrible how it plays out.
Well, they're taking inspiration from the Gallaghers, from the side of things, in terms of how they're getting on. Yeah.
Who knows? 10, 15 years later, it's all going to be mended, and they'll be happy again. But at the moment, our showbiz guys have got the inside track on all this, and it'll be lots more on this.
Lots in the sun tomorrow. I should say, I mean, I had a terrible relationship with my own brother for about 25 years, and you just get through it, and we just did the last 7 or 8 years. We can just, everybody can, I mean, if Liam and Noel Gallagher could get on a stage together, okay, there's a lot about whether they're actually speaking and doing very much together and staying in different hotels and all the rest of it, but if they can at least be on a stage together, a small matter of hundreds of millions of pounds, of course. But another family drama. I love this story about the dad on holiday. Just tell us the story.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, this is one of my favourite ones of the day. So this is a chap. He was he's a Parisian, so he's from France, and he's driving his wife and daughter. It's a very long trip, all the way down to Morocco. Stops for petrol. As he's getting the petrol, his wife gets out the car to go to the loo. He gets back in the car, completely forgets he's supposed to be driving his wife anywhere.
As you do.
But he doesn't realise after 500 yards or a mile or anything like that, it's about 200 miles he manages to drive. I imagine in complete peace and serenity, because his daughter's sleeping in the car, so she doesn't even know the mum's gone. He gets 200 miles down the road, completely panics, has to pull over.
You would think his phone would be going ballistic.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I don't think the wife even had the phone, so she's got out for a week.
Yeah.
So he's had to get the police involved, launch this whole nationwide hunt because he couldn't remember. He said, well, I was in the Orleans region, but now I'm in...
Well, you don't remember. If you stop at a petrol station, you don't remember exactly where it is.
He didn't remember exactly where it was, so the police had to be alerted. They were combing the whole place. They found this. I don't think she was very happy.
I would imagine she wouldn't have been, yes.
And he was quizzed by police because they didn't believe that he'd done it by accident.
Surely no one could be that stupid. Oh, no, actually.
Exactly, but he... yeah, they let him go on his way with a bit of a slap on the wrist. They said, yeah, it's highly unusual, to put it mildly, the cop said. And obviously, look, we all remember that time. It made us remember when poor old David Cameron
left his daughter in a pub.
Left his daughter in the pub, yeah, so it can happen. Yeah.
Have you ever left a relative somewhere, petrol station, pub, wherever it's happened? Have you by mistake left a child or a wife or any relative anywhere? I'd love to hear people's stories. 0344 499 1000. You read all about Dumb for the Road in the paper tomorrow. John, thank you very much indeed. That's John Lucas there, who's night news editor at The Sun. Lots in the paper tomorrow. No doubt we'll be following up some of those stories in my programmes between 10 and 1 tomorrow, and indeed on Sunday. Gaz has been in touch and says there's a fail-safe way to get in to see Oasis. Jump on a small boat across Heaton Park Boating Lake. That is one thought, Gaz. Thank you very much for all your messages. We'll get to more of them and your phone calls as well in just a minute here on Talk.
What we're talking about here, 50 a week, something like that.
Yeah, 50 to 50 a week. Yeah.
It's 50 a week. Okay. You said today there's about over 700.
We think 700 a day, 2,599 last week. Think about that.
So it's anything up to 1,000 a day, right, at the moment.
Yeah.
Now, how the hell have we got here? Because in 2018, it was around the number of migrants crossing the Channel was 299 for the year.
We're hearing from John a second ago about the dad on holiday who drove almost 200 miles before remembering he left his wife at a petrol station, and I asked you to ring in with your stories. Peter's given me a ring from Surrey. Peter, tell us your story.
Hi, yeah, good to hear from you. This is funny because I was telling a couple of colleagues only this week about how we left our young son, Jack Daniel. I won't give his surname, but his Christian names or his forenames are Jack Daniel, which always raises an eyebrow, or did when we took him to the US. And if we met a Presbyterian immigration officer, they were a little bit disgusting. If we met someone from Texas, they were absolutely delighted. Anyway, we were out on quite a raucous night out at the bike club in Hampton Wick at the White Hart, and we did leave our son under the table in the pub. We weren't driving. We had a lift.
How old was he at the time?
He would have been about 8 months.
Oh, it's only small. Easy to forget. Easy to forget. So when did you realise? Hopefully you hadn't gone 200 miles before you realised that you'd forgotten him.
We were only about. So we were in Hampton Hill, and we were only in Hampton Wick at the pub. So it was only about 15 or 20 minutes away. And
15 or 20 minutes, and then you suddenly went, "Hold on, where's the baby?"
Well,
What was it like when you realised, when you had that sudden realisation? How did you find out? Did someone ring you, or what happened?
No. We it's really good of you to give us a lift to the pub. Thanks very much. And then I looked behind, and I thought, well, my wife's there, but where's the car seat? And I said, do you know what? I think there's something missing here. We need to go back. But we were quite relaxed about it. It was just one of those things.
And he was all right. He wasn't traumatised for life by the experience.
And to be honest, he was very quiet as a baby. And we took him to our local Indian restaurant in Hampton Hill within 24 hours of being born. So we were used to lugging him around everywhere.
Well, no harm done anyway, there, Peter.
No harm done.
Yeah.
But it's easily done, and. Yeah, they don't know anything about it.
No, of course. He of course didn't know. Peter, thanks for sharing that story with us. I appreciate that. Tracy has been in touch as well. He says, yes, my nan left me outside the co-op back in the 60s, supposed to be babysitting while my parents were at work. She got back. We've got a voice note as well from Lyndon.
My mum went into Birmingham city centre with me in the pram, left me at one door, went into Rackham's, exited another door, got on a bus, got halfway home, realised I was still outside Rackham's. I do believe she panicked, had to rush back, and I was fine. But that was back in 1964. So, great show, Pete.
Thanks, Lyndon. Appreciate that. And maybe not my favourite, but certainly the most interesting president of the United States is, of course, Lyndon B. Johnson. I've been to his ranch, I've been to his presidential library. I've read many thousands, hundreds of thousands of words about him. So thanks for the voice note, and great name as well, Lyndon. Let's speak to Anne-Marie in Lancashire. She's got some thoughts on migration. Anne-Marie, thanks for bearing with us. I know we've kept you waiting for a little while. What would you like to say?
That's all right. It's a nice day.
Yeah, it is a nice day. It's a lovely day. What is it? Is it nice and sunny in Lancashire?
It is very much so, yes. It's been in the 26, I think it was today. It's lovely.
Very nice, very nice. So what do you think of this migration story then?
Just is that Starmer said he'd break the gangs, but what he's actually done is breaking Brexit. And I think this has been a concerted effort from the EU. We brought in, I think it was 11 boats in 2018, and they've just ramped it up ever since. And I don't think any of our prime ministers has had any interest in stopping it whatsoever. There's plenty clauses in the UN. They could leave the refugee convention with just a letter. I think that they've wanted this to break Brexit. I think that's what all this is.
So that's what they're trying to get rid of. You think we're trying to move on from that?
Well, I think that's a plot and a plan.
Okay.
So that the whole country can, see, Brexit didn't work. The EU have gone against us at every turn. They've made it life very hard for us. I mean, our taxpayers built the EU as it is now. And yet they've been relentless on their attack to us. And I would like to say it loud to the rest of the country. It's a con, it's a lie. They just want to have us back in there. Can it be for our good? And it'll be without the concessions that Maggie Thatcher got us.
Yeah.
It's a great deal.
Yeah, indeed, on the veto and on the rebate and all the rest of it. I think a lot of people will agree with you, Anne-Marie, and thank you very much indeed for your thoughts on that. Lots of people getting in touch about being left places as children. Laura says, 50 years ago, my sister took her newborn out to the village shop for some fresh air. My mum was helping my sister at the time. It wasn't until my sister returned that my mum asked, "Where's the baby?" My sister had totally forgotten she had a baby brain. Thankfully, it was safe back then, says Laura. Wayne is in Newcastle. You were left somewhere. Tell us about this.
Hi, Peter. Yeah, great show, mate.
Thanks.
My mum had gone down to the post office to pick up a child benefit or whatever. Back then, it was like the 1970s. And she took me down, put us in the queue to the post office. She'd stood in the queue with everybody else, went and collected it, and went back home to my granddad's, and she got to my granddad's, and my granddad went, Gwenda, where's our Wayne? And my mum kind of went, oh, yes. I was only about 8 weeks old or something like that.
Yes.
And she had to leg it back down to the post office, and luckily everybody in the queue thought I belonged to the person in front of them.
Right, yeah, yeah, so there's no issue.
So she kind of had to leg it in and grab us and take us back home. But I've never let her forget it.
I'm sure, although you, of course, don't remember it.
Obviously, no, I don't remember it.
It didn't traumatise you too much, Wayne?
No, but I've gotten my own back many a times, Peter.
Glad to hear it, glad to hear it. Have you ever forgotten her?
What, me mum?
Yeah.
No.
Wouldn't do that. Only an idiot would do that. Wayne, thanks very much. You've brightened my day by telling me that story. He was left outside the post office as a baby. That's Wayne in Newcastle there. Harry has been in touch from Sheffield about reform and Farage. What do you make of Nigel Farage, Harry? I know you have some conflicting thoughts perhaps on this.
Yeah. Well, you could do a full show about the babies being dropped all over the place. You've forgotten everywhere. That would be absolutely amazing.
The one I had, Harry, just before you talk about Farage, was my friend Paul. He had his wife had a baby, and he was very good. He was a very attentive dad, and he had one of those kind of papoose things that you sort of strap the baby in and you do it all up and whatever. Yeah. And he was doing the whole thing. He was putting it over his shoulder. He was putting it around his head and getting it all. It's sort of a quite elaborate thing to put on. And he goes, "There's something missing here. What? I've strapped it all in, but I can't help it. It's sort of like, oh, the baby. I've forgotten to put the baby in. He'd forgotten to put the baby in, and so he had to take it all off and put it all on again."
Oh gosh, that's corrective.
Yeah,
absolutely gentle. Well,
so Harry, tell us your thoughts on reform.
Yeah, I supported Farage for a long time about Brexit stuff and Boris Johnson basically not doing what he was supposed to do and all this type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But since then, right, I've watched Nigel Farage. I've got stuff in the pond that bends in the wind, and I've got a one bulrush that's so strong it doesn't bend; it stays upright.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And Farage, I don't know what he's chasing. Is he chasing?
Do you think he's softened, Harry?
I think he's just bending in the wind. He needs the support, right, of everybody. But he had the support of everybody when he was saying what he needed to say. When he said, I think once he said we'll shift them all,
mm-hmm.
and then he decided, oh, it's impossible that.
Would you vote for him right now, Harry?
No, I don't trust the man.
Okay, that's interesting. Yeah.
No, honestly, I supported him honestly for years.
Yeah.
And I have actually watched him.
Uh-huh.
Right. In fact, the last election, when I went down to Larby in the polling station, there was no Reform candidate on it, so I spoilt my ballot.
Right. Okay.
Right.
Well, good for you for going to the polling station, Harry, because and spoiling your ballot if that's what you want to do. I have always believed there should be a none of the above box in the ballot. I think people should look. I've turned up. I've done my democratic duty, but actually I don't like any thing that's on offer. I think that is something that should be on offer. Robert is in London and has some thoughts on the safety of our capital city. Robert, what would you like to say? You're very welcome to the programme.
Well, there's so much going on in London at the moment. You've got the rape gangs. You've got people coming in from France who don't even know what they are. I also believe, I don't know if you agree with me with this, but I think we've already got terrorists in this country already.
Well, we do, and it's very, very dangerous for many people, not just in London as well, around the country as well, Robert.
Yeah, and then you've also got, I heard yesterday about Iran going to put threats in this country on us as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, they're targeting people here. They've done that a lot. Yeah, that is a very, very important story, and we will cover that over the weekend on my shows as well, Robert.
So what's happening with the security services? What are they meant to be doing? Are they meant to be checking up on people coming into the country? Yeah. You know, it's just a joke at the moment.
Yeah.
And Carl Starmer, all he's interested in Europe. He's not interested in this country anymore, I don't believe.
You don't think Starmer's interested in the UK anymore?
No, I don't think Osama's interested here. All he wants to do is be on the platform in Europe.
Yeah, a lot of people seem to have that sentiment. A lot of people say that he's not interested in domestic politics. He would say that this migration plan will go some way to solving the small boots crisis. Do you have any faith in that, Robert?
No, I don't, because what is it going to be? One in, one out. What's that going to do? That's not going to make any difference.
Yeah, it's a very fair point. Listen, thanks for your thoughts there, Robert. That's Robert there in London. And thank you to Sean and Bester, who's been in touch as well. Quite a few people getting in touch about it. It's a great story in The Sun tomorrow about a dad on holiday driving almost 200 miles before remembering he'd left his wife at a petrol station. The 62-year-old Parisian was driving through France towards Morocco with his 60-year-old spouse. The daughter was in the car as well. This is France 3, the broadcaster, reporting this story, but it's going to be in The Sun tomorrow. As John Lucas was telling us there a little bit earlier on, when he stopped for petrol in the Orléans region on the 5th of July, his daughter was asleep and his wife got out to use the loo without him realising. 200 miles without realising his wife wasn't there. And Sean says a friend of mine went on a 4-hour journey to go fishing for the weekend. They had booked accommodation and packed tackle, bait, chairs, shelters, enough to fill the 4x4 vehicle. It was only when they got to the fishing spot and started to set up they realised they'd forgotten the fishing rods. Well, that is a sort of fairly crucial aspect of that. And Steve says the Frenchman obviously perfected the art of drowning out white noise. Ooh, Steve. Legend, I have to admit. I burst out laughing and managed to duck the wife's shoe as it flew past my head. Well done on avoiding injury. Kevin is with us on the other side of the news. Hi, Kevin. What's coming up on your show?
Well, obviously more on this ridiculous deal, the one in, one out fiasco that will never get off the ground.